Hello there. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Right now, as you settle in, something extraordinary is happening inside your skull. Around 86 billion neurons are sparking in patterns so complex that science still cannot fully explain them. Your brain is using about 20 watts of power, less than a dim light bulb, yet it is generating something no machine has ever truly replicated: conscious awareness. Consciousness is the most familiar thing in the universe, and also the most mysterious. You experience it every waking moment. Yet no one can fully explain how electrical signals in wet tissue become the vivid sensations, memories, and thoughts that make up your inner world. Tonight, we journey through the extraordinary landscape of the conscious mind. We will explore over 100 soothing facts about awareness, from the hidden depths of sleep to the puzzling nature of perception, from the boundaries where the self dissolves to the quiet mysteries that science has yet to solve. There is no test at the end, no rush, no urgency, just the gentle unfolding of the mind's most beautiful and surprising secrets to carry you softly toward sleep. So let your breathing slow, let your thoughts soften, and allow yourself to drift peacefully into the quiet wonder of what it means to be aware. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. I am glad you found your way here tonight. Perhaps you have had a long day. Perhaps you simply enjoy falling asleep to thoughts about the mysteries of the mind. Either way, this space is for you. There is something profoundly calming about contemplating consciousness. You are the universe become aware of itself. Every thought you have is made of stardust and electricity. Every memory is a pattern of connections forged by experience. Your very sense of being here, reading these words, is one of the deepest puzzles in all of science. And yet, consciousness does not demand to be understood tonight. It only asks to be experienced, to be felt as it slowly softens into the peaceful rhythms of approaching sleep. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. So settle in. Let the weight of the day drift away like thoughts dissolving at the edge of sleep. And let us begin with the first of many peaceful truths about what it means to be conscious. The brain is the most complex object we know of in the universe. It contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. Yet from all this complexity, something singular emerges: your experience of being you. Tonight, we will wander through this magnificent landscape. We will meet altered states and strange syndromes, explore the edges of awareness, and discover truths about consciousness that may surprise even the most curious minds. But there is no hurry. Consciousness has been contemplating itself for thousands of years. It can wait a little longer while you rest. Let us begin with the quiet electricity that gives rise to awareness. The brain uses about 20 watts of power, yet generates the richness of conscious experience. Consider for a moment that the device generating your entire conscious reality runs on less power than a refrigerator light bulb. Your brain, weighing roughly 1.4 kilograms, consumes approximately 20 watts of energy, about the same as a dim LED lamp. Yet it produces the full spectrum of human experience, from love and fear to memory and imagination. This remarkable efficiency puts even the most advanced supercomputers to shame, as machines attempting to simulate brain-like processes require millions of watts to perform tasks your brain accomplishes effortlessly. The energy comes primarily from glucose delivered through an intricate network of blood vessels totaling over 600 kilometers in length. Despite representing only about 2% of your body weight, your brain demands roughly 20% of your total energy intake, making it the most metabolically expensive organ in your body. Even while you sleep, your brain continues its quiet electrical symphony, never truly resting but simply shifting into different modes of activity that maintain and repair the delicate neural networks upon which your consciousness depends. Neurons communicate through electrical impulses that travel at speeds up to 120 meters per second. Every thought you have, every sensation you feel, every memory you recall begins as an electrical impulse racing along the delicate fibers of your neurons. These signals, known as action potentials, travel at remarkable speeds that can reach 120 meters per second in the fastest nerve fibers, roughly equivalent to the speed of a racing Formula One car. The speed of neural transmission varies depending on the thickness of the nerve fiber and whether it is coated in a fatty insulating substance called myelin. Myelinated fibers conduct signals much faster than unmyelinated ones, which is why certain reflexes and sensory pathways evolved thick, well-insulated neurons. When you touch a hot stove, the pain signal races toward your brain at impressive speed, yet even this rapid transmission takes precious milliseconds, during which your reflexes have already begun pulling your hand away through spinal cord circuits. The electrical nature of neural communication was first demonstrated in the 18th century, when Luigi Galvani discovered that frog legs could be made to twitch with electrical stimulation, opening the door to our modern understanding of the brain as an electrochemical organ. The brain contains around 86 billion neurons, each capable of thousands of connections. Within the soft tissue of your skull exists a network of staggering complexity. Approximately 86 billion neurons form the processing units of your brain, each one a tiny biological computer capable of receiving, integrating, and transmitting information. But the true magic lies not in the neurons themselves, but in their connections. Each neuron can form up to 10,000 synaptic connections with other neurons, creating a web of communication pathways that numbers in the hundreds of trillions. If you could count one synapse per second, it would take you over 3 million years to count them all. This interconnected network is what gives rise to everything you experience as consciousness, from the simplest sensation of warmth to the most complex philosophical thought. No two brains are wired exactly alike, as the precise pattern of connections reflects the unique experiences and learning history of each individual. Every time you learn something new or form a memory, the strength and configuration of these connections subtly shifts, meaning your brain is literally rewiring itself with each passing moment of experience. Brain waves change frequency as consciousness shifts between states of alertness and sleep. The billions of neurons in your brain do not fire randomly, but coordinate their activity in rhythmic patterns that scientists can measure using electroencephalography. These patterns, known as brain waves, oscillate at different frequencies depending on your state of consciousness. When you are fully alert and focused, your brain produces fast, low-amplitude beta waves cycling at roughly 13 to 30 times per second. As you begin to relax and drift towards sleep, slower alpha and theta waves emerge, reflecting a quieter, more inwardly focused mental state. During deep sleep, the brain generates even slower delta waves that sweep across large regions of cortex in synchronized pulses. The transition between wakefulness and sleep involves a careful orchestration of these rhythmic patterns, with different brain regions gradually falling into synchronized slow-wave activity. Scientists have discovered that these rhythmic oscillations are not merely byproducts of brain activity, but serve essential functions, binding together information from different brain regions and facilitating the communication between neurons that underlies perception, memory, and thought. Gamma waves are associated with focused attention and moments of insight. Among the various rhythms that pulse through your brain, gamma waves occupy the fastest frequency band, oscillating at roughly 30 to 100 cycles per second. These rapid oscillations have been linked to some of the most interesting aspects of conscious experience, including focused concentration, the binding together of sensory information, and sudden moments of insight. When you concentrate intensely on a difficult problem, gamma wave activity increases across your cortex, particularly in regions involved in attention and executive control. Some of the most fascinating research has found that gamma waves spike dramatically in the moment, just before a creative breakthrough, as if the brain is rapidly integrating disparate pieces of information into a coherent solution. Studies of experienced meditators have revealed unusually high and sustained gamma wave activity, suggesting that contemplative practices may enhance the brain's capacity for this type of focused, integrated processing. Gamma waves appear to help synchronize activity across distant brain regions, creating the neural coherence that may underlie our unified conscious experience of the world. Alpha waves increase when you close your eyes and relax. Simply closing your eyes triggers a measurable change in your brain's electrical activity. Within moments of shutting out visual input, alpha waves begin to emerge more prominently, particularly over the regions of your brain devoted to vision at the back of your head. These waves, oscillating at roughly 8 to 12 cycles per second, were the first brain rhythms ever recorded, discovered by German psychiatrist Hans Berger in the 1920s. Alpha waves are associated with a state of wakeful relaxation, a peaceful alertness that is neither highly focused nor drifting toward sleep. They increase during meditation, daydreaming, and moments of calm reflection, serving as a signature of the brain in a restful but conscious state. When you open your eyes or engage in active mental effort, alpha waves are suppressed and replaced by faster beta rhythms. Some researchers believe alpha waves reflect the brain's idle state, a kind of standby mode that allows the visual cortex to rest when not processing external information. Others suggest they play an active role in inhibiting distracting information and focusing attention inward. Whatever their precise function, alpha waves remind us that even in moments of apparent stillness, our brains remain electrically alive and dynamically adjusting to our inner and outer world. During deep sleep, the brain generates slow delta waves that synchronize across large regions. As you sink into the deepest stages of sleep, your brain enters a state of remarkable coordination. Billions of neurons that normally fire in complex, seemingly chaotic patterns begin to pulse together in slow, rhythmic waves known as delta oscillations. These waves, cycling at roughly 1 to 4 times per second, sweep across vast regions of the cortex, like gentle swells moving across a calm ocean. This synchronized activity represents a fundamentally different mode of brain function from the varied, desynchronized patterns of waking consciousness. During these slow waves, neurons alternate between brief periods of intense activity and periods of near-complete silence, a coordinated dance that appears essential for the restorative functions of sleep. Scientists believe this synchronized activity allows the brain to perform critical maintenance tasks, consolidating memories, clearing metabolic waste, and restoring the energy reserves depleted during waking hours. The deeper you sleep, the more dominant these slow waves become, and the more difficult it becomes to wake you. This is the brain at its most internally focused, temporarily withdrawn from the external world to attend to its own essential housekeeping. Theta waves appear during light sleep and deep relaxation. Between the alert vigilance of waking and the profound depths of slow wave sleep lies a transitional territory marked by theta waves. These rhythmic oscillations, cycling at roughly 4 to 8 times per second, emerge prominently during light sleep and states of deep relaxation. As you begin drifting off at night, theta waves gradually replace the alpha rhythms of relaxed wakefulness, signaling your brain's transition toward the unconscious realms of sleep. Theta activity also increases during daydreaming, meditation, and the hypnagogic state that marks the boundary between waking and sleeping, that strange twilight zone where thoughts become untethered and fleeting images drift through awareness. In the hippocampus, a structure crucial for memory, theta waves play an important role in learning and the formation of new memories. Some researchers believe that theta oscillations help coordinate the flow of information between different brain regions, facilitating the integration of new experiences into existing knowledge structures. This gentle rhythm represents consciousness in transition, neither fully engaged with the outer world nor entirely withdrawn into sleep, but hovering at the threshold between the two. REM sleep involves rapid eye movements and brain activity similar to waking consciousness. Several times each night, your sleeping brain enters a remarkable state that in many ways resembles waking consciousness more than sleep. During rapid eye movement sleep, your eyes dart frantically beneath closed lids, while your brain generates electrical patterns nearly indistinguishable from those of an alert, attentive person. This is when the most vivid and memorable dreams typically occur, elaborate narratives complete with sensory experiences, emotions, and sometimes bizarre violations of physical law that seem perfectly normal within the dream. Despite this intense brain activity, your body remains almost completely paralyzed, a protective mechanism that prevents you from acting out your dreams. REM sleep was first discovered in the 1950s, when researchers noticed the distinctive eye movements and realized that sleep was not a uniform state, but a cycle of distinct stages. Throughout the night, you cycle through these stages multiple times, with REM periods becoming longer and more frequent toward morning. This strange hybrid state, with a brain as active as during waking but a body as still as during the deepest sleep, represents one of the most fascinating mysteries of consciousness. The brain processes emotional experiences during REM sleep, helping to regulate mood. While you dream, your brain is quietly working through the emotional residue of your waking experiences. REM sleep appears to serve as a kind of overnight therapy, processing difficult emotions and stripping away their raw emotional intensity, while preserving the factual content of memories. Studies have shown that people who get adequate REM sleep are better able to recognize and regulate their emotions upon waking, while those deprived of REM sleep tend to become more emotionally reactive and prone to negative mood states. The amygdala, a brain region central to emotional processing, becomes highly active during REM sleep, replaying emotional experiences in a neurochemical environment different from waking. Notably, stress hormones like norepinephrine are suppressed during REM sleep, which may allow emotional memories to be processed in a calmer internal climate. This helps explain why sleep deprivation often leads to irritability, anxiety, and difficulty managing stress. Each night as you cycle through REM sleep, your brain is essentially providing itself with emotional maintenance, helping you face the next day with a more balanced and regulated emotional state. Sleep deprivation can lead to hallucinations and symptoms resembling psychosis. When deprived of sleep for extended periods, the boundaries of consciousness begin to blur in disturbing ways. After about 48 hours without sleep, many people begin to experience mild hallucinations, often seeing shadows move in their peripheral vision, or hearing sounds that are not there. By 72 hours, these hallucinations can become more elaborate and harder to distinguish from reality. Extended sleep deprivation produces symptoms that resemble psychosis, including paranoia, disorganized thinking, and profound perceptual disturbances. This is not mere fatigue, but a genuine alteration of consciousness, caused by the brain's inability to maintain normal function without the restorative processes that occur during sleep. The record for intentional sleep deprivation, set in 1964, stands at 11 days, by which point the subject was experiencing significant cognitive impairment and hallucinations. Laboratory research suggests that extreme sleep deprivation can eventually prove fatal in animals, though ethical considerations prevent studying this in humans. These dramatic effects highlight how essential sleep is not just for rest but for maintaining the integrity of conscious experience itself. The glymphatic system clears waste from the brain during sleep like a biological cleaning crew. While you sleep, an extraordinary cleaning system activates within your brain. The glymphatic system, discovered only in 2012, uses cerebrospinal fluid to flush metabolic waste products out of the brain tissue and into the bloodstream for disposal. During sleep, the spaces between brain cells expand by as much as 60%, allowing this cleansing fluid to flow more freely and efficiently remove toxic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. Among the waste products cleared by this system is beta amyloid, a protein that forms the plaques found in the brains of Alzheimer's disease patients. This discovery has profound implications for understanding the connection between sleep and neurological health, suggesting that chronic sleep deprivation may contribute to the accumulation of harmful substances that damage the brain over time. The glymphatic system operates most effectively during deep, slow-wave sleep, providing yet another reason why this stage of sleep is so essential for brain health. When you sleep, you are not merely resting but allowing your brain to clean itself, washing away the molecular debris of the day's mental activity. Sleep paralysis occurs when the mind awakens before the body regains movement. Imagine waking in the darkness, fully conscious of your surroundings, yet completely unable to move a single muscle. This terrifying experience is sleep paralysis, a phenomenon that occurs when the brain emerges from REM sleep before it has lifted the temporary paralysis that normally prevents us from acting out our dreams. During these episodes, which typically last from a few seconds to a couple of minutes, people often report a profound sense of dread and the presence of a threatening figure in the room. This hallucinatory component arises because the brain remains partially in a dream state, even as awareness of the real environment returns. Throughout history, sleep paralysis has been interpreted as supernatural visitation, from the incubus demons of medieval Europe to the shadow people of modern accounts. In reality, it is a neurological phenomenon that affects roughly 8% of the population at some point in their lives. The experience can be made worse by stress, irregular sleep schedules, and sleeping on one's back. Though deeply unsettling, sleep paralysis is harmless, a temporary glitch in the complex choreography of transitions between sleep and waking. Sleepwalkers can perform complex behaviors while remaining unconscious. Sleepwalking reveals just how much complex behavior can occur without conscious awareness. During episodes of somnambulism, people rise from deep sleep and walk about, sometimes performing elaborate actions while their conscious mind remains entirely offline. Sleepwalkers can navigate their environment, open doors, climb stairs, and even hold coherent conversations, all while having no awareness of what they are doing. These episodes typically occur during the first few hours of sleep, emerging from the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep, rather than from the dream-rich REM stage. Upon waking, sleepwalkers usually have no memory of their nocturnal adventures. The condition is most common in children, with estimates suggesting up to 15% of children sleepwalk at some point. While most episodes are harmless, involving nothing more than confused wandering, sleepwalkers have been known to attempt more dangerous activities. The phenomenon demonstrates that consciousness is not required for many of the behaviors we think of as inherently intentional, raising fascinating questions about the nature of awareness and the complex neural systems that operate beneath the surface of our conscious minds. Some people have driven cars or cooked meals while completely asleep. The most extreme cases of sleepwalking involve behaviors so complex that they seem impossible without conscious awareness, yet they occur in individuals who are genuinely asleep by every objective measure. There are documented cases of people driving cars for many kilometers, preparing elaborate meals, sending coherent text messages, and even engaging in sexual activity while completely asleep. These behaviors emerge from the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep and are performed without any memory formation whatsoever. One famous case involved a man who drove over 20 kilometers, killed his mother-in-law, and seriously injured his father-in-law while sleepwalking, an incident that led to a controversial legal verdict of not guilty by reason of automatism. Such cases raise profound questions about moral and legal responsibility when consciousness is genuinely absent from behavior. They also highlight how much of our daily functioning relies on automated neural programs that can operate independently of conscious awareness. The brain during complex sleepwalking is not dreaming in the usual sense, but rather executing well-learned motor sequences, while higher cognitive functions remain dormant, creating a dissociation between action and awareness that challenges our intuitions about the nature of the self. Narcolepsy can cause sudden collapses, triggered by strong emotions. Narcolepsy is a neurological condition that dramatically illustrates the fragile boundaries between waking and sleeping states of consciousness. People with narcolepsy experience sudden, overwhelming urges to sleep that can strike at any time, regardless of how much rest they have had. Even more striking is a symptom called cataplexy, in which strong emotions trigger a sudden loss of muscle tone that can cause the person to collapse while remaining fully conscious. Laughter, surprise, anger, or excitement can cause the knees to buckle, the jaw to drop, or in severe cases, the entire body to go limp. This occurs because the brain mechanism that normally paralyzes the body only during REM sleep becomes inappropriately activated during waking, triggered by the neural circuits involved in emotion. Narcolepsy affects roughly 1 in 2,000 people and is caused by the loss of neurons that produce a neurotransmitter called hypocretin or orexin. These neurons normally help maintain the boundaries between sleep and waking, and their absence causes the different states of consciousness to blur and intrude upon one another in unpredictable ways. Lucid dreamers can become aware they are dreaming and even communicate with researchers. Within the mysterious landscapes of dreams, some people achieve a remarkable feat of consciousness. They become aware that they are dreaming while the dream continues around them. This state, known as lucid dreaming, represents a hybrid form of consciousness that combines the vivid sensory experiences of the dream world with the self-awareness and critical thinking normally associated with waking. Lucid dreamers can often exert some degree of control over their dreams, choosing to fly, explore impossible environments, or confront frightening dream characters. Perhaps most remarkably, researchers have established two-way communication with lucid dreamers using pre-agreed eye movement signals. In carefully controlled laboratory studies, lucid dreamers have answered questions from researchers by moving their eyes in specific patterns, proving that conscious awareness can persist during REM sleep. Brain imaging studies show that lucid dreaming activates regions of the frontal cortex that are normally quiet during ordinary dreams, suggesting that lucidity represents a genuine reactivation of higher cognitive functions within the sleeping brain. This phenomenon challenges simple distinctions between sleeping and waking consciousness, revealing that awareness can exist in forms and states we are only beginning to understand. External sounds and sensations can sometimes be woven into dreams. The sleeping brain is not entirely cut off from the external world. Sounds, smells, and physical sensations can penetrate the barrier between waking and sleeping, and become incorporated into the ongoing narrative of dreams. A ringing alarm clock might transform into a telephone in your dream, or the sound of rain against the window might become a waterfall in your dreamscape. This phenomenon, known as incorporation, reveals that the sleeping brain continues to monitor the environment at some level, processing incoming sensory information even while attention is directed inward. Studies have shown that meaningful sounds, like one's own name, are more likely to be incorporated or to trigger awakening than meaningless noises, suggesting that the sleeping brain maintains some capacity for selective attention. The way external stimuli are transformed as they enter dreams often reflects the brain's attempt to preserve sleep by weaving the intrusion into the ongoing dream narrative, rather than allowing it to trigger full awakening. This filtering and transformation of sensory information demonstrates that even in sleep, consciousness is not a simple on-off switch but a complex system with multiple levels and modes of awareness. Anesthesia can temporarily shut down consciousness by disrupting neural communication. Every day, millions of people around the world have their consciousness temporarily switched off through the carefully controlled administration of anesthetic drugs. General anesthesia induces a state of unconsciousness so profound that patients feel no pain and form no memories of surgical procedures that would otherwise be traumatic. This medical marvel works by disrupting the normal patterns of communication between neurons, interfering with the electrical and chemical signals that bind the brain's activity into coherent conscious experience. Different anesthetic agents work through different mechanisms, with some enhancing inhibitory neurotransmitters that quiet brain activity, while others block excitatory signals that normally keep neurons firing. The result is a reversible loss of consciousness that can be precisely controlled by the anesthesiologist. Unlike natural sleep, which cycles through predictable stages, anesthesia induces a state from which no external stimulus can cause awakening. The patient's brain still functions at a basic level, maintaining vital functions like breathing and heartbeat, but the higher-order processes that generate subjective experience are temporarily suspended. About 1 in 1,000 patients may experience awareness during surgery. Despite the remarkable reliability of modern anesthesia, a small number of patients experience a phenomenon called anesthetic awareness, in which consciousness partially returns during surgery. Estimates suggest this occurs in roughly 1 in 1,000 general anesthetics, though the exact incidence is difficult to determine, because not all patients recall their experiences afterward. For those who do, the experience can range from vague sensations of pressure or hearing muffled voices, to the terrifying awareness of surgical pain, without the ability to move or communicate distress. Awareness during surgery occurs most commonly during emergency procedures, cardiac surgery, and cesarean sections, where the doses of anesthetic must be carefully balanced against the patient's physiological vulnerability. The psychological aftermath of such experiences can be severe, with some patients developing post-traumatic stress disorder. Modern anesthesia now includes brain monitoring technologies that detect changes in electrical activity that may signal returning consciousness, helping anesthesiologists adjust drug levels in real time. Nevertheless, the possibility of awareness during surgery remains one of the most unsettling aspects of surrendering consciousness to medical intervention. Some patients under anesthesia can still hear sounds around them without conscious recall. Researchers revealed that the anesthetized brain may process more information than was previously believed, even when no conscious awareness is present. In carefully controlled studies, patients under general anesthesia have been played recordings of words or stories, and while they had no conscious memory of this upon awakening, their behavior suggested that some processing had occurred. Patients exposed to positive suggestions during surgery sometimes showed faster recovery times, while those who could subsequently recognize words they had heard under anesthesia demonstrated that the information had been encoded at some level. This implicit processing occurs in the absence of explicit memory formation, meaning patients cannot recall the experiences, but may nevertheless be influenced by them. The findings suggest that anesthesia does not simply switch off all brain function, but rather disrupts the specific processes that give rise to conscious awareness and memory consolidation. This has led to guidelines recommending careful attention to what is said in the operating theatre, as the sleeping patient may still be listening in some unconscious sense, absorbing information that could influence their emotional state upon recovery. Scientists still do not fully understand how anesthetics suppress consciousness. Despite using anesthesia safely millions of times each year, scientists remain uncertain about exactly how these drugs extinguish conscious awareness. We know that anesthetics affect the brain's electrical activity, disrupting the communication between brain regions that normally generates coherent conscious experience. But which of these disrupted processes is specifically responsible for the loss of consciousness remains unclear. Some researchers believe anesthetics work by decreasing the overall complexity of brain activity, reducing the rich interactions between regions that characterize the waking state. Others focus on specific structures like the thalamus, a central relay station that may serve as a consciousness switch. Still others suggest that anesthetics disrupt the precise timing of neural oscillations that normally bind activity across the brain into unified experience. The question of how anesthesia works is deeply connected to the even harder question of how consciousness arises in the first place. Until we understand what consciousness is, and how the brain generates it, we cannot fully explain how drugs manage to temporarily turn it off while leaving other brain functions intact. The moment of returning from anesthesia can feel like no time has passed at all. One of the most striking aspects of general anesthesia is the complete absence of subjective time during unconsciousness. Patients typically report that the moment of falling asleep and the moment of awakening seem to occur in immediate succession, with no sense of the hours that may have passed between them. This is fundamentally different from natural sleep, where we usually have some vague sense of time having passed upon awakening. Under anesthesia, consciousness does not merely diminish but appears to cease entirely, creating a gap in the fabric of subjective experience. This subjective timelessness provides a window into the nature of consciousness itself, suggesting that our sense of continuous existence depends on ongoing brain activity that can be completely interrupted by the right chemicals. Some patients describe the experiences like being temporarily erased from existence, a glimpse of what it might feel like to not exist at all. For most, this is merely curious, but for those contemplating the nature of death, the anesthetic experience offers a strangely comforting preview of what permanent unconsciousness might be like, a simple absence, rather than an experience of darkness or void. Some coma patients can respond to commands using only their brain activity. In hospital beds around the world, there are patients who appear completely unresponsive, yet may harbor hidden islands of awareness that cannot be detected through bedside examination. Research using functional brain imaging has revealed that some patients diagnosed as being in vegetative states can actually follow commands, not by moving their bodies, but by modulating their brain activity in specific ways. In groundbreaking studies, patients were asked to imagine playing tennis or walking through their home, and brain scans revealed patterns of activity indistinguishable from those of healthy volunteers performing the same mental tasks. This discovery has profound implications for our understanding of consciousness and for the ethical treatment of patients in disordered states of awareness. If a patient can reliably activate specific brain regions on command, does this constitute evidence of conscious awareness, even if no outward behavior is possible? These findings have led to the development of brain-computer interfaces that may eventually allow some unresponsive patients to communicate their wishes and experiences. The boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness, once thought to be clear, has proven to be far more complex and permeable than anyone imagined. brain scans have revealed hidden awareness in patients believed to be unconscious. The advent of sophisticated brain imaging technology has fundamentally changed our understanding of consciousness in patients who appear unresponsive. Studies using functional MRI and electroencephalography have detected signatures of awareness in patients whose clinical examinations suggested no consciousness at all. In one remarkable investigation, researchers found that up to 20% of patients diagnosed with vegetative state showed brain responses consistent with covert awareness. These patients could hear speech, process language, and in some cases respond to requests through changes in their brain activity. The implications are staggering, as thousands of patients around the world may possess some level of awareness that goes unrecognized by standard clinical assessments. This research has prompted a reassessment of the categories used to describe disordered consciousness, with new diagnostic labels like minimally conscious state and cognitive motor dissociation acknowledging the complexity of these conditions. For families of unresponsive patients, these discoveries offer both hope and anguish, suggesting their loved ones may still be present in some meaningful sense, while remaining locked within bodies that cannot respond. Locked-in syndrome leaves a person fully conscious, but unable to move any muscle except the eyes. Of all the conditions that disrupt the relationship between consciousness and behavior, locked-in syndrome is perhaps the most harrowing. Patients with this condition remain fully conscious and cognitively intact, yet are completely paralyzed, except for the ability to move their eyes, and sometimes their eyelids. The syndrome typically results from damage to the brainstem, which disrupts the pathways carrying motor commands from the brain to the body, while leaving the regions responsible for consciousness intact. From the outside, locked-in patients may appear to be in a coma or vegetative state, as they cannot speak, move, or outwardly respond to their environment. But inside, a fully aware mind is trapped, able to see, hear and think, yet unable to communicate, except through painstaking eye movements or blinks. Perhaps the most famous account of this condition comes from journalist Jean-Dominique Bauby, who dictated an entire memoir by blinking his left eyelid as an assistant recited the alphabet. His book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, offers a haunting glimpse into consciousness imprisoned within a motionless body. Some people have emerged from comas with memories of hearing conversations around them. When patients awaken from comatose or minimally conscious states, their accounts sometimes reveal surprising access to events that occurred while they were unresponsive. Some report having heard conversations between doctors and family members, recalled music that was played in their hospital rooms, or remembered being touched or repositioned by nursing staff. These testimonies, though difficult to verify scientifically, suggest that some degree of sensory processing can continue, even in patients who appear completely unconscious. The memories are often fragmentary and dreamlike, woven together with hallucinations and confabulations, making it difficult to distinguish genuine recall from reconstructed imagination. Nevertheless, the consistency of such reports across many patients has led to changes in how medical professionals behave around unresponsive patients. Healthcare workers are now encouraged to explain procedures before performing them, speak respectfully about the patient in their presence, and create as calm and supportive an environment as possible. Whether or not these patients are truly aware, treating them as if they might be, seems both ethically appropriate and potentially beneficial for their recovery. Cardiac arrest survivors sometimes report awareness during clinical death. The borderlands between life and death contain some of the most mysterious experiences of human consciousness. A significant number of people who suffer cardiac arrest and are subsequently resuscitated report having had vivid experiences during the period when their heart was not beating and their brain was receiving no blood flow. These near-death experiences often include common elements, such as feelings of peace, the perception of moving through a dark space toward a bright light, encounters with deceased relatives, and sometimes a life review, in which key moments flash before the eyes. The existence of conscious experience during cardiac arrest presents a profound puzzle for neuroscience, as the brain typically loses consciousness within seconds of cardiac arrest when blood and oxygen supplies are cut off. Some researchers suggest these experiences occur during the brief window before complete brain shutdown, or during the process of resuscitation as brain function returns. Others propose more radical explanations that challenge assumptions about the relationship between brain activity and consciousness. Whatever their explanation, these experiences profoundly affect those who have them, often transforming their attitudes toward death and the meaning of life. Cutting the corpus callosum creates two separate streams of consciousness in one brain. In the 1960s, surgeons discovered that cutting the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerve fibers connecting the brain's two hemispheres, could dramatically reduce seizures in patients with severe epilepsy. This operation, known as a corpus callosotomy, had unexpected consequences that would revolutionize our understanding of consciousness. When the bridge between hemispheres was severed, patients appeared to function normally in everyday life. Yet, careful testing revealed something extraordinary. Each hemisphere seemed to have developed its own separate stream of awareness. Because the left hemisphere typically controls language, patients could only verbally report what the left hemisphere experienced. Information presented only to the right hemisphere, which could not speak, remained inaccessible to verbal report, yet could be demonstrated through actions. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, might reach for objects based on information the patient could not describe. These split-brain patients challenged the assumption that each person possesses a single, unified consciousness, suggesting instead that our sense of being oneself may depend on the constant communication between brain regions that the corpus callosum provides. Split-brain patients can have one hand act against the wishes of the other. Among the most striking phenomena observed in split-brain patients is the conflict that can arise between the two hands, each apparently guided by its own intentions. In documented cases, one hand might reach for a shirt in the wardrobe, while the other pushes it away and selects a different one. One patient reported that his left hand would sometimes attempt to strike his wife, while his right hand tried to protect her. This conflict arises because each hemisphere, now isolated from the other, can pursue its own goals without the usual coordination that produces unified behavior. The left hemisphere, which controls the right hand and generates speech, may have one intention, while the right hemisphere, controlling the left hand, has another. Most remarkably, the speaking left hemisphere often seems unaware that it is not in complete control, sometimes confabulating explanations for actions initiated by the disconnected right side. These observations suggest that even in normal brains, what feels like unified conscious intention may be the product of multiple processes that usually coordinate so seamlessly we never notice their separate contributions. Each hemisphere can have different preferences and even conflicting intentions. The split-brain research revealed that the two hemispheres of the brain can hold different attitudes, preferences, and even beliefs about the world. In some patients, the two hemispheres answered differently when asked about future plans or personal preferences. One patient's left hemisphere expressed a desire to become a draftsman, while his right hemisphere, communicating through pointing or other nonverbal means, indicated a preference for automobile racing. Another patient's left hemisphere described itself as an atheist, while the right side appeared to believe in God. These discrepancies raise profound questions about personal identity and the nature of the self. Which hemisphere represents the true person when they disagree? Or are there perhaps two people now inhabiting the same skull, each with its own experiences and desires? For most split-brain patients, these conflicts are subtle, and life proceeds relatively normally, with the two hemispheres learning to cooperate despite their isolation. But the dramatic cases of disagreement remind us that the unity we feel as individuals may be more constructed and contingent than we ordinarily assume. The left hemisphere often creates explanations for actions it did not initiate. One of the most fascinating discoveries from split brain research involves the left hemisphere's tendency to generate explanations for behaviors it did not cause and cannot understand. In classic experiments, researchers presented commands exclusively to the right hemisphere, which would then direct the left hand to perform an action such as walking to a door or picking up an object. When asked why they performed these actions, patients did not say they did not know. Instead, the speaking left hemisphere would instantly confabulate a plausible explanation, claiming they were going to get a drink of water or wanted to look at a picture on the far wall. This phenomenon, dubbed the interpreter function of the left hemisphere, reveals a fundamental aspect of how our brains construct conscious experience. The left hemisphere appears to be constantly creating narratives to explain our behavior and maintain a coherent sense of self, even when it lacks access to the actual causes of our actions. This interpreter may be at work in all of us, spinning stories about why we do what we do without always having access to the unconscious processes that truly drive our behavior. Alien hand syndrome makes a limb seem to move independently without conscious control. Alien hand syndrome is a rare neurological condition in which a person's hand appears to act with a mind of its own, performing purposeful movements that the conscious mind neither intends nor controls. The syndrome can result from damage to the corpus callosum, stroke affecting specific brain regions, or certain neurodegenerative diseases. Patients describe their alien hand as having its own intentions, reaching for objects without permission, unbuttoning shirts that the other hand just buttoned, or even grasping people or things inappropriately. Some patients give their alien hand a name or address it as a separate entity, so complete is the sense that it belongs to someone or something else. The condition vividly demonstrates that conscious will and motor action can become dissociated, challenging our intuitive sense that we are the unified authors of all our movements. In some cases, patients learn to suppress the alien hand by sitting on it or holding it with their other hand, physically restraining an appendage that their brain can no longer control through normal voluntary channels. Short-term memory can hold about 7 items at once. The stream of consciousness that flows through your awareness at any given moment is remarkably limited in its capacity. Psychologist George Miller famously described this limitation as the magical number 7, plus or minus 2, referring to the number of distinct items that short-term memory can hold at once. Try to remember a phone number you have just heard, and you will experience this limitation directly, as your mind struggles to retain more than about 7 digits without additional strategies like chunking or rehearsal. This bottleneck in conscious processing exists because the neural networks that maintain information in short-term memory can only sustain a limited number of active patterns simultaneously. When new information enters, older items tend to be displaced unless they are actively rehearsed or transferred to long-term storage. This limitation shapes the very nature of conscious experience, forcing us to focus on small slivers of the vast information available in our environment. Everything beyond this narrow spotlight of attention remains outside awareness, processed unconsciously or not at all. Working memory allows you to manipulate information in real time. Beyond simply holding information in mind, consciousness allows us to actively manipulate mental content through a system known as working memory. This is the mental workspace where you perform calculations, follow the thread of a conversation, or plan what to say next in a discussion. Working memory involves not just storage but active processing, allowing you to compare different pieces of information, rearrange them, and use them to guide ongoing thought and behavior. The prefrontal cortex plays a central role in working memory, maintaining the neural activity that keeps relevant information accessible while you work with it. Individual differences in working memory capacity have been linked to intelligence, academic performance, and success in complex cognitive tasks. When you solve a problem in your head, or imagine how a situation might unfold before it happens, you are relying on working memory to hold and manipulate the mental representations that make such thinking possible. This capacity is what allows consciousness to be more than a passive receiver of information, transforming us into active processors who can think ahead, consider alternatives, and plan for the future. Long-term memories are stored in distributed networks across the brain. While short-term memories depend on ongoing neural activity that fades within seconds, long-term memories are encoded in more durable changes to the brain's structure and connectivity. These memories are not stored in any single location, but distributed across networks of neurons that span multiple brain regions. The memory of your childhood home, for example, involves visual cortex for what it looked like, auditory regions for the sounds you heard there, emotional circuits for how it made you feel, and semantic networks for what you knew about it. When you recall this memory, these distributed components are reactivated and bound together into a coherent conscious experience. The formation of long-term memories requires a process called consolidation, during which the connections between relevant neurons are strengthened and reorganized, particularly during sleep. This distributed architecture makes memory robust in some ways, as damage to one brain region may leave partial memories intact, but it also means that each act of remembering is an active reconstruction rather than a simple playback, subject to distortion, updating, and creative elaboration. Emotional events are remembered more strongly than neutral ones. The memories that tend to persist most vividly across the years are those accompanied by strong emotions. This phenomenon reflects the influence of the amygdala, an almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that processes emotional significance and modulates memory formation. When an event triggers strong emotion, whether fear, joy, anger, or love, the amygdala releases signals that enhance consolidation of that experience into long-term memory. This makes adaptive sense, as emotional events are often those most relevant to survival and well-being, and remembering them helps guide future behavior. The vividness of emotional memories can be both blessing and curse. We treasure our most joyful experiences, partly because they remain so accessible to recall, but traumatic memories can be similarly persistent, intruding into consciousness unbidden, and sometimes forming the basis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Research suggests that the emotional intensity of a memory is not related to its accuracy, meaning that the events we remember most vividly are not necessarily remembered most correctly. Strong emotion appears to enhance the sense of remembering without necessarily improving the precision of what is remembered. Some drugs can prevent new memories from forming while leaving old ones intact. Certain substances can selectively disrupt the formation of new memories while leaving previously stored memories accessible, creating gaps in the timeline of conscious experience. Benzodiazepines, commonly used for anxiety and as surgical premedications, are particularly known for this anterograde amnesic effect. A patient given such medication may have a conversation, undergo a procedure, and feel perfectly alert throughout, yet form no lasting memory of the experience. Upon awakening fully, they may ask questions about what happened, having no sense that hours have passed. Alcohol in sufficient quantities produces similar effects, creating the so-called blackouts, in which people function behaviorally, while failing to record memories of their actions. These gaps in memory formation occur because the drugs interfere with the hippocampal processes necessary for consolidating short-term experiences into long-term storage. The self that existed during the amnesic period is in some sense lost, a consciousness that experienced the world but left no trace of its passage. These pharmacological effects demonstrate that consciousness in the moment and the recording of that consciousness into memory are separable processes that can be independently disrupted. Memory ripples during sleep help consolidate experiences into lasting knowledge. As you sleep, your brain replays the experiences of the day in compressed, accelerated form. Sharp wave ripples, brief bursts of intense neural activity originating in the hippocampus, sweep through the brain hundreds of times each night, replaying patterns that correspond to waking experiences. These ripples occur primarily during deep non-REM sleep and appear to be essential for transferring memories from temporary hippocampal storage to more permanent cortical networks. Studies in rodents have shown that the sequences of neural firing observed during exploration of a maze are replayed in accelerated form during subsequent sleep, as if the brain were reviewing and consolidating what was learned. Experiments disrupting these ripples impair memory formation, while enhancing them seems to improve retention. This process helps explain why sleep deprivation so profoundly impairs learning and memory, as the consolidation work that normally occurs during sleep cannot proceed efficiently. Each night, as you drift through the stages of sleep, your brain is quietly transferring the day's experiences into the architecture of long-term memory, transforming fleeting conscious moments into the lasting knowledge that shapes who you are. False memories can be planted through repeated suggestion. The reconstructive nature of memory makes it surprisingly vulnerable to distortion and fabrication. Decades of psychological research have demonstrated that it is possible to implant entirely false memories in the minds of healthy individuals through repeated suggestion and social pressure. In classic experiments, researchers successfully convinced participants that they had experienced events in childhood that never actually occurred. From relatively mundane false memories like being lost in a shopping center, to more dramatic fabrications like riding in a hot air balloon or witnessing demonic possession. Once implanted, these false memories can feel as vivid and emotionally compelling as genuine recollections, complete with sensory details and feelings of certainty. The subjects are not lying but genuinely remembering events that never happened. This malleability of memory has profound implications for everything from eyewitness testimony in legal proceedings to therapeutic practices that may inadvertently create false memories while trying to recover real ones. The sense of remembering something is not reliable evidence that the event actually occurred, a humbling reminder of the constructive and reconstructive nature of conscious recollection. Group recall can distort original memories through social influence. Memories are not stored in isolation, but exist within social contexts that can reshape them over time. When people discuss shared experiences with others, their individual memories can be altered by the group conversation. A phenomenon called memory conformity or social contagion of memory occurs when information provided by one person becomes incorporated into another person's recollection. In studies of this effect, participants who witnessed an event together and then discussed it often came to remember details mentioned by their discussion partners as if they had perceived those details themselves. This social contamination of memory can occur even when the partner's information is incorrect, leading to the spread of false memories through groups. Family stories repeated at gatherings, events discussed with friends, and media coverage of public incidents all have the potential to reshape individual memories in ways that make them conform to shared narratives. The result is that what we remember about the past is partly a social construction, shaped not just by our own perceptions, but by the memories and stories of those around us. Déjà vu creates the strange feeling that the present moment has happened before. Nearly everyone has experienced the uncanny sensation of déjà vu, the sudden, fleeting impression that the present moment has been lived before. During these episodes, which typically last only seconds, the current experience feels eerily familiar, despite the logical knowledge that it cannot have occurred previously. Scientists have proposed multiple theories to explain this common phenomenon. One hypothesis suggests déjà vu occurs when the brain's familiarity detection system is activated inappropriately, generating a sense of recognition without corresponding memory content. Another theory proposes that it results from a slight temporal delay in the processing of information, so that conscious awareness of an event arrives slightly after the brain has already begun processing it, creating an illusion of prior experience. Certain factors increase the likelihood of déjà vu, including fatigue, stress, and age, with young adults experiencing it more frequently than older individuals. While disconcerting, occasional déjà vu is entirely normal and appears to reflect momentary glitches in the brain systems that distinguish between familiar and novel experiences. Jamais vu makes familiar things suddenly feel unfamiliar. The opposite of déjà vu is a phenomenon called jamais vu, in which something well-known suddenly seems strange and unfamiliar. You might be writing a common word you have written thousands of times, and suddenly find yourself staring at it as if you have never seen it before, uncertain whether you have spelled it correctly. Or you might look at the face of someone you know intimately, and for a moment experience them as a stranger. Jamais vu can be induced experimentally by having people repeatedly write or say a word until it loses its meaning, a phenomenon called semantic satiation. In normal experience, jamais vu is rarer than déjà vu, but is reported by most people at some point in their lives. When it occurs, it reveals that the sense of familiarity we usually take for granted is actively constructed by the brain and can be disrupted, revealing the strangeness that underlies even the most ordinary experiences. For those who experience jamais vu frequently or intensely, it can be associated with certain neurological conditions, but occasional episodes are simply another reminder of the complex machinery that underlies even the simplest aspects of conscious recognition. Some people have highly superior autobiographical memory and can recall almost every day of their lives. At the extreme end of memory ability, a handful of individuals possess what researchers call highly superior autobiographical memory, the capacity to recall virtually every day of their lives in extraordinary detail. Given any date from the past several decades, these individuals can immediately describe what day of the week it was, what the weather was like, what they did, and what was in the news. They do not use mnemonic techniques or make special efforts to remember. The memories simply persist with unusual completeness and clarity. Brain imaging studies of these individuals reveal structural differences in regions associated with memory, including the temporal lobe and the caudate nucleus. Interestingly, their exceptional memory appears specific to autobiographical information about their own lives, rather than reflecting a general enhancement of all memory abilities. Living with such total recall is not always pleasant, as painful memories persist as vividly as happy ones, and cannot be diminished through the normal fading that time provides for most of us. These rare cases illuminate the spectrum of human memory capacity and raise questions about why most of us forget so much of our daily experience, while a few retain nearly everything. Synesthesia causes senses to blend so that sounds may have colors or numbers may have tastes. For a small percentage of the population, sensory experiences blend together in ways that most people never experience. This condition, called synesthesia, causes stimulation of one sense to automatically trigger perceptions in another. A synesthete might see specific colors when hearing particular musical notes, taste flavors when reading words, or perceive numbers as having distinct personalities and spatial locations. These cross-modal experiences are not metaphorical or imagined, but are genuine perceptual experiences that are remarkably consistent over time. with the same stimulus always triggering the same synesthetic response. Brain imaging studies confirm that synesthetes show activation in sensory regions that would not normally respond to the triggering stimulus, suggesting that their brains genuinely process information across sensory boundaries. The condition tends to run in families and may involve unusual connections between brain regions that are typically separate in most people. Far from being a disorder, many synesthetes treasure their unusual perceptions, describing them as enriching their experience of music, language, or mathematics, and providing a window into the many possible ways consciousness can construct sensory reality. Blind sight allows people with certain brain damage to respond to visual stimuli they cannot consciously see. One of the most remarkable demonstrations of unconscious visual processing occurs in patients with a condition called blind sight. These individuals have damage to the primary visual cortex, the brain region responsible for conscious visual experience, rendering them blind in part or all of their visual field. Yet, despite being unable to consciously see anything in their blind region, they can still respond to visual information presented there. When forced to guess whether a light is on or off, or to point toward an object they claim they cannot see, their performance is far better than chance would predict. They can navigate around obstacles, catch objects thrown toward their blind side, and discriminate between emotional expressions on faces they report seeing nothing of. Blind sight suggests that multiple visual pathways exist in the brain, with some capable of guiding behavior without generating conscious experience. The patients are genuinely blind in the sense of having no visual awareness, yet visual information still reaches parts of their brain that can influence action. This dissociation between seeing and knowing that you see reveals that consciousness is not necessary for all forms of visual processing. Phantom limb sensations prove that body awareness is constructed by the brain. When a limb is amputated, the brain does not immediately update its internal map of the body. Many amputees continue to feel vivid sensations from a limb that no longer exists, a phenomenon known as phantom limb syndrome. These sensations can include feelings of position, movement, pressure, warmth, cold, itching, and unfortunately for many, pain that seems to originate in the missing body part. The persistence of phantom limbs demonstrates that our conscious sense of having a body is not a simple readout of signals from our tissues, but an actively constructed model maintained by the brain. Even when the limb is gone, the neural representation of it persists, continuing to generate sensory experiences with no correspondence to physical reality. Some researchers have developed therapeutic approaches based on this understanding, using mirrors or virtual reality to create the visual illusion of the missing limb, and allowing patients to move and manipulate it, often providing remarkable relief from phantom pain. These treatments work by updating the brain's body model, demonstrating how powerfully perception shapes conscious experience, even when it conflicts with physical fact. Some blind people have learned to use echolocation by clicking their tongues. The flexibility of the human brain in constructing conscious experience is beautifully demonstrated by blind individuals who have learned to navigate by sound. Human echolocation involves making clicking sounds with the tongue, or tapping a cane, and listening to the echoes that return from surrounding objects. Experienced practitioners can determine the location, size, shape, and even texture of objects in their environment based on subtle differences in the returning sound waves. Brain imaging studies reveal that when blind echolocators process these echoes, they activate the visual cortex, the part of the brain normally devoted to sight. This suggests the brain has repurposed visual processing regions for spatial analysis based on sound rather than light. Some skilled echolocators can navigate complex environments, ride bicycles, and even play sports using only acoustic information. Their abilities demonstrate that the human brain is not rigidly programmed to construct spatial awareness from light alone, but can adapt to build a detailed model of the world from whatever sensory information is available. Sensory deprivation can cause vivid hallucinations within hours. When the brain is cut off from its normal stream of sensory input, it does not simply go blank. Instead, it begins generating its own experiences, producing vivid hallucinations that can be visual, auditory, or tactile. Experiments in sensory deprivation tanks, where subjects float in darkness and silence in body temperature water, have documented the emergence of hallucinations within hours or even minutes of deprivation. These can range from simple patterns and flashes of light to complex scenes, faces, and sounds. The phenomenon suggests that the brain is constantly active, generating predictions and patterns of activity that normally are constrained and shaped by incoming sensory information. When that information is removed, the brain's spontaneous activity has nothing to anchor it to reality, and the result is the emergence of hallucinatory experience. Extreme isolation, as experienced by prisoners in solitary confinement or explorers in caves, can produce similar effects over longer time frames. The brain, it seems, abhors a perceptual vacuum and will fill the emptiness with its own creations when external input is withdrawn. Migraine auras can create visual disturbances that spread slowly across the field of vision. For roughly a quarter of migraine sufferers, the onset of a headache is preceded by strange visual disturbances known as auras. These typically begin as a small shimmering spot near the center of vision and expand slowly over a period of 15 to 30 minutes, creating a crescent or arc of flickering zigzag patterns that drift across the visual field. The hallucinations often feature geometric shapes, sparkling lights, or regions of visual loss that move steadily from one side of the visual field to the other. These phenomena correlate with a wave of electrical activity spreading across the visual cortex, a slow tide of neuronal excitation followed by depression that moves at approximately 3 millimeters per minute. This cortical spreading depression was first described by physiologist Carl Lashley, based on careful observation of his own migraine auras in the 1940s. For those who experience them, migraine auras offer a direct window into the electrophysiology of the visual brain, a visible representation of neural activity spreading across the cortex that might otherwise go entirely unnoticed. Time seems to slow down during moments of extreme danger or fear. Nearly everyone who has experienced a life-threatening moment reports the same phenomenon. Time seemed to slow to a crawl, allowing them to perceive events in remarkable detail that would normally flash by too quickly to register. Car accident survivors describe watching the collision unfold in slow motion. Soldiers recall bullets that seem to drift lazily through the air. This subjective stretching of time during crisis is one of the most universal alterations of consciousness, yet its mechanism remains a subject of debate. Some researchers suggest that high adrenaline states cause the brain to lay down denser memories, creating an expanded record that is subsequently recalled as having taken longer than it actually did. Others propose that extreme attention and arousal genuinely accelerate the rate of neural processing, packing more conscious moments into each objective second. Experiments have attempted to distinguish between these explanations by testing whether people in frightening situations can actually perceive faster events, with mixed results. Whether the slow motion effect is genuine in the moment or an illusion of retrospection, it represents one of the most dramatic demonstrations of how subjective time can diverge from clock time. Isolation from external cues can cause a person to lose track of days or weeks. Our sense of time passing depends heavily on external signals that anchor our biological rhythms to the day and night cycle. When these cues are removed, our subjective sense of duration becomes remarkably unreliable. Cave explorers and experimental subjects living in environments without natural light or clocks often experience profound distortions of temporal perception. In famous isolation experiments conducted in underground caves, subjects reported that what felt like a single day was often 2 or even 3 days of objective time. The French explorer Michel Siffre spent months in caves without time cues, and frequently misjudged periods of sleep and waking by massive margins. These experiments reveal that our internal sense of elapsed time is not a reliable clock, but depends on accumulated patterns of activity, sleep, social interaction, and environmental change to maintain calibration. When these patterns are disrupted, consciousness can drift far from objective reality, with entire days passing unnoticed, or hours stretching to feel like weeks. Astronauts report altered perceptions of time during long space missions. The unique environment of space travel creates conditions that profoundly alter the perception of time. Astronauts on the International Space Station experience 16 sunrises and sunsets every 24 hours as they orbit the Earth, disrupting the normal cues that anchor circadian rhythms. Many report that their sense of how much time has passed becomes unreliable, with some days seeming to stretch endlessly while others vanish before they register. The monotony of the spacecraft environment, the absence of earthly landmarks, and the disruption of normal sleep schedules all contribute to this temporal distortion. On longer missions planned for Mars, these effects may become even more pronounced, as astronauts spend months or years in confined spaces with limited variability in their environment. Space agencies are studying how to mitigate these effects through carefully designed lighting schedules, structured routines, and countermeasures against the psychological challenges of long-duration spaceflight. The experiences of astronauts remind us that our sense of time flowing normally depends on conditions we rarely notice until they are removed. The brain can stretch or compress subjective time based on emotional state. Emotional intensity powerfully shapes how we experience the passage of time. When we are bored or suffering, time seems to drag unbearably, each minute stretching to feel like an hour. When we are deeply engaged or enjoying ourselves, hours can pass in what feels like minutes. This elasticity of subjective time reflects the brain's allocation of attention and the rate at which it processes and encodes experience. During emotionally intense moments, the brain may process more information than usual, creating a denser record of experience that is remembered as having taken longer. Conversely, automatic, routine activities that require little attention create sparse mental records that shrink in retrospect. Neuroimaging studies have revealed that several brain regions, including the insular and basal ganglia, are involved in time perception, and their activity is modulated by emotional state. The phenomenon explains why vacations full of novel experiences seem long while they are happening but short in retrospect, while routine weeks at home seem to pass quickly but leave little trace in memory. Flow states can make hours feel like minutes as attention becomes fully absorbed. When a person becomes completely absorbed in an activity, a remarkable transformation of consciousness can occur. The sense of time passing fades, self-consciousness diminishes, and awareness becomes completely focused on the activity at hand. Psychologists call this the flow state, a condition of optimal experience in which challenge and skill are perfectly matched, and the person feels deeply engaged and intrinsically motivated. Athletes describe being in the zone, musicians speak of becoming one with the music, and artists report losing themselves in their work, all manifestations of flow. During these states, hours may pass in what subjectively feels like minutes, and the normal sense of self observing its own experience dissolves into pure engagement with the task. Flow states are associated with changes in brain activity, including reduced activation of the default mode network that generates self-referential thinking. The phenomenon reveals that our normal sense of time as a steady, flowing stream is actually dependent on particular patterns of brain activity that can be dramatically altered when attention is completely captured by engaging activity. Psychedelics can temporarily dissolve the sense of self and expand perception. Substances such as psilocybin, LSD, and mescaline produce some of the most profound alterations of consciousness known to science. Under their influence, the usual boundaries of the self can temporarily dissolve, leading to experiences of merging with the universe, losing the sense of being a separate individual, and perceiving reality in radically transformed ways. Colors may intensify, geometric patterns may appear, and the familiar sense of time and space may become profoundly distorted. Brain imaging studies have revealed that psychedelics work partly by disrupting the default mode network, a collection of brain regions associated with self-referential thinking and the maintenance of the ego. When this network is suppressed, consciousness becomes less constrained by habitual patterns, and novel connections between brain regions can form. Many who undergo these experiences report lasting changes in their perspective on life, death, and their place in the universe. Recent clinical research has begun exploring whether psychedelics might help treat conditions like depression, addiction, and end-of-life anxiety by inducing transformative experiences that shift patterns of thinking and behavior. Meditation can quiet the default mode network and reduce self-referential thinking. The ancient practice of meditation produces measurable changes in brain activity and conscious experience. When meditators enter states of focused attention or open awareness, brain imaging reveals reduced activity in the default mode network, the same collection of regions disrupted by psychedelics. This network is associated with mind-wandering, rumination, and the kind of self-referential thinking that generates our ongoing internal narrative about who we are and what is happening to us. When the default mode network quiets, practitioners often report experiences of stillness, presence, and release from the usual chatter of the thinking mind. Different meditation traditions cultivate different states, from intensely focused concentration to expansive awareness to the contemplation of loving kindness, each associated with distinct patterns of brain activity and subjective experience. Decades of research have documented benefits of regular meditation practice, including reduced stress and anxiety, improved attention and emotional regulation, and enhanced feelings of well-being. These effects suggest that the ordinary waking consciousness most of us take as fixed and inevitable is actually just one mode among many that the brain can adopt. Long-term meditation practice can physically change the structure of the brain. The brains of experienced meditators differ in measurable ways from those of non-meditators, demonstrating that mental practices can produce physical changes in the organ that generates consciousness. Neuroimaging studies have found that long-term meditators tend to have increased gray matter density in regions associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. The prefrontal cortex, which is involved in executive function, often shows enhanced development, while the amygdala, the brain's fear center, may show reduced size and reactivity. These structural differences are correlated with years of practice, suggesting that they are produced by meditation, rather than being pre-existing characteristics of people who choose to meditate. Even relatively brief training programs, spanning weeks rather than years, have been shown to produce measurable changes in brain structure and function. The phenomenon demonstrates the remarkable plasticity of the brain, its ability to reshape itself in response to how it is used. Consciousness is not merely housed in the brain, but actively sculpts it over time through the patterns of activity it generates. Hypnosis can alter perception and reduce pain sensitivity. The phenomenon of hypnosis has fascinated and puzzled scientists for centuries. Under hypnosis, suggestions from a hypnotist can produce dramatic changes in perception, memory, and sensation. Hypnotized subjects may fail to see objects in front of them, experience paralysis in limbs they know are fully functional, or recall detailed memories of events that never occurred. Perhaps most practically significant, hypnosis can reduce the perception of pain and has been used successfully for surgical procedures in patients who cannot receive chemical anesthesia. Brain imaging reveals that hypnotic suggestions produce real changes in neural activity, with areas of the brain responding as if the suggested experience were actually occurring. This is not mere imagination or role-playing, but involves genuine alterations in how the brain processes information. The susceptibility to hypnosis varies considerably between individuals, with perhaps 10 to 15% of the population being highly hypnotizable, and a smaller percentage being essentially immune to hypnotic suggestion. What makes some brains more susceptible than others remains unclear, but the phenomenon demonstrates how powerfully verbal suggestion can reshape conscious experience. Microdosing involves taking tiny amounts of psychedelics to enhance focus or creativity. A growing practice called microdosing involves taking subperceptual amounts of psychedelic substances, doses too small to produce obvious hallucinatory effects, but potentially sufficient to influence cognition and mood in subtle ways. Advocates claim that regular microdosing enhances creativity, improves focus, elevates mood, and increases openness to new ideas without the dramatic alterations of consciousness associated with full psychedelic doses. The practice has gained popularity in some technology and creative industries, though it remains illegal in most jurisdictions. Scientific research on microdosing is still in its early stages, complicated by legal restrictions and the difficulty of conducting rigorous placebo-controlled studies. Early results are mixed, with some studies finding benefits and others suggesting that expectation effects may account for much of what microdosers report. Whether microdosing represents a genuine tool for cognitive enhancement or merely a more socially acceptable form of placebo remains to be determined by future research. The phenomenon illustrates the growing interest in using altered states of consciousness as tools for self-improvement, rather than merely as experiences to be avoided or indulged. Near-death experiences often include a tunnel of light and a profound sense of peace. Across cultures and throughout history, people who have come close to death and recovered have reported remarkably similar experiences. These near-death experiences commonly include feelings of profound peace and well-being, the sensation of separation from the body, movement through a dark tunnel toward a brilliant light, encounters with deceased relatives or spiritual beings, and a comprehensive review of one's life. The consistency of these elements across vastly different cultural backgrounds has led some to believe they represent genuine glimpses of an afterlife, while others argue they are the products of a dying or stressed brain generating predictable patterns of activity. Neurological explanations have focused on oxygen deprivation, the release of endorphins, and abnormal activity in temporal lobe structures associated with spiritual experiences. Whatever their ultimate explanation, near-death experiences are transformative for those who have them, often leading to reduced fear of death, increased spirituality, and lasting changes in values and life priorities. They remain among the most fascinating intersections of consciousness, neuroscience, and questions about the nature of existence. Some people report life reviews, where key moments flash before their eyes. Among the most common elements of near-death experiences is the life review, a rapid panoramic recollection in which key moments of the person's life flash before their awareness. Unlike ordinary memory, these reviews are often described as occurring outside of normal time, with entire lifetimes compressed into what objectively might be only seconds. Many who undergo this experience report not merely observing their past actions, but feeling the emotional impact of those actions on others, experiencing the joy or pain they caused from the perspective of those affected. This creates profound insights into the moral weight of their behavior, and often leads to lasting changes in how they treat others upon recovery. Some describe the review as non-judgmental, a neutral witnessing of their life's path, while others report feeling a sense of accountability or the presence of a guiding figure. Scientists have proposed that life reviews may result from unusual hippocampal activity during oxygen deprivation or trauma, perhaps involving the same mechanisms that underlie flashback experiences in post-traumatic stress disorder. Whatever their cause, life reviews represent one of the most transformative aspects of near-death experience. Low oxygen levels in the brain can trigger hallucinations similar to near-death experiences. Several features of near-death experiences can be replicated, at least partially, by reducing oxygen supply to the brain. Pilots and astronauts undergoing acceleration training, which forces blood away from the brain, often report tunnel vision, seeing a bright light, and feelings of peace remarkably similar to those described in near-death accounts. Hypoxia, or low oxygen, causes disinhibition of certain brain regions and can trigger a cascade of unusual neural activity that produces hallucinations and altered states of consciousness. The dying brain, deprived of oxygen as circulation fails, may undergo similar processes, generating experiences that feel profoundly meaningful, even though they arise from physiological stress rather than supernatural causes. This does not diminish the significance of these experiences for those who have them, as the subjective impact remains real regardless of the underlying mechanism. The oxygen deprivation hypothesis offers a partial explanation for near-death experiences, though it may not account for all their features, particularly the elaborate cognitive content like life reviews and encounters with deceased relatives that some experiencers report. Out-of-body experiences may occur when the brain's body map becomes disrupted. Many near-death experiences include the sensation of leaving the physical body and observing oneself from an external vantage point, often from above. These out-of-body experiences can also occur in other contexts, including during meditation, under the influence of certain drugs, or as a result of specific types of brain stimulation. Neuroscientists have linked out-of-body experiences to disruptions in the temporoparietal junction, a brain region involved in integrating sensory information to construct our sense of being located within our bodies. When this region's normal functioning is disturbed, the coherent sense of bodily ownership can fragment, causing awareness to seem to separate from its usual physical location. In laboratory settings, researchers have induced out-of-body-like experiences by providing conflicting visual and tactile information, demonstrating that the sense of inhabiting a body is an active construction that can be fooled and disrupted. These findings suggest that out-of-body experiences during near-death events may reflect temporary dysfunction of the brain systems that normally anchor consciousness within the physical form. Epileptic seizures can sometimes trigger experiences resembling spiritual visions. Throughout history, many religious figures and visionaries have been retrospectively diagnosed by some historians as having temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that can produce experiences strikingly similar to mystical visions and near-death states. Seizure activity in the temporal lobes, particularly in the right hemisphere, can trigger intense feelings of presence, profound meaningfulness, hearing voices, and visions of beings or lights. The famous Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky, who had epilepsy, described ecstatic auras preceding his seizures that he considered among the most profound experiences of his life. Some patients report feeling merged with the universe, experiencing what seems like direct contact with the divine, or perceiving hidden truths about reality during seizure auras. These experiences arise from abnormal electrical activity in brain regions involved in emotion, memory, and self-awareness, yet they feel overwhelmingly real and significant to those who have them. The phenomenon illustrates how spiritual and transcendent experiences can emerge from the brain's electrical storms, raising questions about the relationship between neural activity and the sense of encountering something beyond ordinary reality. Deep brain stimulation can evoke vivid memories and unusual conscious states. When surgeons probe the living brain with electrical stimulation during neurosurgical procedures, remarkable experiences can sometimes be evoked. The pioneering neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield famously mapped the brains of epilepsy patients in the 1930s through 50s, finding that stimulation of certain temporal lobe regions could trigger vivid memories, music, and re-experiences of past events. Patients would suddenly find themselves reliving a birthday party, hearing a song they had not thought of in years, or experiencing the feeling of being in a specific place from their past. Modern deep brain stimulation, used to treat Parkinson's disease, depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder, can also produce unusual effects on consciousness, sometimes including changes in mood, motivation, or even personality. These observations demonstrate that conscious experiences, including memories we thought long forgotten, can be accessed by directly activating the neural circuits that encode them. The brain, it seems, holds vast archives of experience that normally lie dormant, but can be reawakened by the right electrical key. Damage to the frontal lobe can dramatically alter personality and decision-making. Perhaps no case in neuroscience history illustrates the relationship between brain and personality more dramatically than that of Phineas Gage. In 1848, this American railroad worker survived an accident in which an iron rod was driven completely through his frontal lobes. Although he lived for another 12 years, those who knew him reported that he was no longer the same person. Once reliable and well-mannered, he became impulsive, profane, and unable to follow through on plans. His case provided early evidence that the frontal lobes are essential for personality, social behavior, and decision-making. Modern studies of frontal lobe damage have confirmed and expanded these observations, revealing that this region is crucial for inhibiting impulses, considering consequences, and maintaining the patterns of behavior that make up our character. Patients with frontal damage may know intellectually what they should do, yet be unable to translate that knowledge into appropriate action. The case reveals that what we think of as our essential self, our character and personality, depends critically on the proper functioning of particular brain regions. Strokes can cause specific losses in awareness, such as the ability to recognize objects or faces. Strokes occur when blood supply to part of the brain is interrupted, causing the death of neural tissue in the affected region. Because different brain areas are specialized for different functions, strokes can produce highly specific deficits that illuminate the modular organization of mental abilities. A stroke affecting the visual cortex might leave a person unable to recognize objects they can clearly see, a condition called visual agnosia. They can describe the color and shape of an object, yet have no idea what it is until they pick it up or hear it make a sound. Other strokes affect more specific recognition systems, leaving patients unable to recognize faces while object recognition remains intact, or unable to perceive motion while seeing static scenes normally. These dissociations reveal that conscious perception is not a unified whole, but is constructed from the contributions of many specialized processing modules. When one module is damaged, its specific contribution to awareness is lost, while others continue to function, unmasking the hidden components that together produce our seamless conscious experience of the world. Prosopagnosia, or face blindness, can make it impossible to recognize even close family members. Imagine looking at your spouse, your child, or your best friend, and seeing a stranger looking back at you. This is the reality for people with prosopagnosia, a condition that impairs the ability to recognize faces. In severe cases, sufferers cannot recognize even their closest family members by face alone, and must rely on voice, clothing, gait, or contextual cues to identify the people in their lives. Some have failed to recognize their own reflection in mirrors or photographs. Prosopagnosia can result from brain damage, particularly to the fusiform face area, or can be present from birth as a developmental condition affecting an estimated 2 to 3% of the population. The condition reveals that face recognition is handled by dedicated neural machinery, separate from the systems that recognize other visual objects. Most of us process faces holistically and effortlessly, without conscious awareness of the computational complexity involved. Prosopagnosia exposes this hidden processing by showing what is lost when it fails, demonstrating that our confident sense of recognition depends on specialized brain systems that can be selectively damaged while leaving other abilities intact. The fusiform gyrus is specialized for processing facial features and can be damaged selectively. Deep within the temporal lobe lies a region called the fusiform gyrus that plays a central role in face perception. Brain imaging studies consistently show that this area becomes highly active when subjects view faces, but responds much less to other visual categories like objects, landscapes, or words. When the fusiform face area is damaged by stroke, tumor, or head injury, the specific deficit of prosopagnosia often results. Interestingly, this region appears to be specialized not just for faces per se, but for the expert-level recognition of any category of visually similar objects. Studies have shown that the fusiform gyrus of car experts becomes active when viewing cars, and that of bird experts responds strongly to birds. This suggests the region may have evolved to handle the challenging task of distinguishing between many highly similar objects, with faces being the most universally important category that all humans must learn to discriminate. The fusiform face area represents a beautiful example of functional specialization in the brain, a dedicated neural module for a specific and vital aspect of conscious social experience. Capgras delusion makes familiar people seem like identical imposters. One of the strangest disorders of consciousness is Capgras delusion, in which a person becomes convinced that a loved one has been replaced by an identical imposter. The sufferer recognizes that the person looks exactly like their spouse, parent, or friend, yet insists that this is not really them but a duplicate, perhaps a robot, alien, or agent of some conspiracy. This bizarre belief often causes profound distress to both the patient and their loved ones. Capgras delusion typically results from disconnection between the brain's face recognition systems and the emotional processing centers that normally generate feelings of familiarity when we see someone we know. The patient consciously recognizes the face but experiences no emotional response, and the brain resolves this contradiction by concluding that the person must be an imposter. The disorder illustrates that recognition of identity involves more than just visual matching of features, but depends on the integration of cognitive recognition with emotional familiarity. When these components are dissociated, consciousness generates bizarre explanations to account for the conflict. Cotard delusion can make a person believe they are dead or do not exist. At the extreme end of neuropsychiatric disorders lies Cotard delusion, a rare condition in which sufferers become convinced that they are dead, do not exist, or have lost their blood and internal organs. First described in 1880 by French neurologist Jules Cotard, the syndrome typically occurs in the context of severe depression, schizophrenia, or following brain injury. Patients may claim that they died weeks ago, that they have no body, or that the world around them does not exist. Some stop eating because they believe the dead have no need for food, posing serious risks to their health. Neuroimaging studies have found unusual patterns of activity in regions involved in self-awareness and emotional processing, particularly reduced activity in areas that generate the felt sense of being alive and present. The phenomenon demonstrates that our basic sense of existing, of being here and alive, is not a given but an active construction of the brain that can fail catastrophically when the right neural systems are damaged. Consciousness normally includes an automatic, background sense of being a living self, so fundamental that we never notice it until it is disrupted. Inner speech activates similar brain regions as speaking out loud. When you think in words, carrying on the silent internal monologue that accompanies much of conscious experience, your brain activates many of the same regions involved in producing actual speech. Brain imaging studies reveal that inner speech engages Broca's area, a region in the frontal lobe essential for language production, as well as areas involved in speech planning and auditory processing. Even the muscles of the larynx show subtle activation during inner speech, as if preparing to produce sound that is never actually vocalized. This overlap between silent thought and spoken language suggests that inner speech may have evolved as an internalization of external communication, with children gradually learning to think in words by first talking aloud, and then progressively silencing the vocalization while retaining the linguistic structure. The close relationship between inner and outer speech has implications for understanding thought disorders like the auditory hallucinations experienced in schizophrenia, which may involve inner speech that is misattributed to external sources. Thinking in words, it seems, is secretly a kind of speaking that the body nearly but not quite produces. Some people rarely experience an inner monologue. The assumption that everyone has a running commentary of inner speech accompanying their conscious experience turns out to be mistaken. Research suggests that the experience of thinking varies dramatically between individuals, with some people reporting a near-constant internal voice and others rarely or never experiencing verbal thought. Those without a prominent inner monologue may think in images, sensations, emotions, or more abstract non-verbal patterns that are difficult to describe in words. When first confronted with the idea that others have a constant stream of internal narration, people without inner speech often express surprise, having assumed their own experience was universal. The discovery that thinking can take such different forms challenges the common philosophical assumption that thought is inherently linguistic. It also raises fascinating questions about how people without inner speech make decisions, remember information, or regulate their behavior, tasks that many of us accomplish partly through verbal self-instruction. The diversity of inner experience reveals that consciousness can take many forms, even among people who outwardly seem to think and behave similarly. Others have a constant internal dialogue narrating their thoughts. At the opposite end of the spectrum from those with minimal inner speech are individuals whose conscious experience is dominated by a continuous verbal narrative. For these people, thoughts emerge as fully formed sentences or dialogues, sometimes including the imagined voices of other people, or multiple aspects of the self, in conversation with each other. The internal monologue may comment on ongoing experience, rehearse upcoming conversations, replay past interactions, or engage in extended reasoning about problems and decisions. Some people find this constant narration helpful for organizing thought and maintaining focus, while others experience it as exhausting or intrusive, particularly when it takes the form of anxious rumination or self-criticism. The volume and quality of inner speech can change with mood, stress, and circumstances, becoming more prominent during difficult decisions, or quieting during absorbing activities. Understanding the nature and variability of inner speech is important for psychology and psychiatry, as disturbances in this normal process may underlie symptoms of various mental disorders, from the intrusive negative thoughts of depression to the external voices heard in psychosis. Aphantasia is the inability to form mental images in the mind's eye. Close your eyes and try to picture an apple. For most people, some form of visual image appears in consciousness, perhaps clear and detailed or vague and fleeting. But for people with aphantasia, a condition identified and named only in 2015, there is nothing, no mental picture at all. When asked to visualize objects, faces or scenes, those with aphantasia report seeing only darkness or blankness, lacking the internal visual experience that most people take for granted. Despite this absence, people with aphantasia can think about visual information, describe what things look like from memory, and often show normal performance on many cognitive tasks. They simply do so without the accompanying subjective experience of seeing mental images. Aphantasia affects an estimated 2 to 3% of the population and can be present from birth or acquired through brain injury. The condition demonstrates that visual thinking and visual imagery are distinct processes, and that the mind can represent visual information without generating conscious visual experience. It reveals another dimension of the hidden diversity in how different minds construct conscious experience. Hyperphantasia allows for extremely vivid mental imagery that feels almost real. At the opposite extreme from aphantasia lies hyperphantasia, a condition in which mental imagery is extraordinarily vivid, detailed, and lifelike. People with hyperphantasia can voluntarily generate mental images so clear and compelling that they approach the intensity of actual perception. They may be able to examine imagined objects from any angle, zoom in on details, or create complex dynamic scenes in their minds with photographic clarity. For some, this capacity is purely delightful, enriching their inner lives with a constant gallery of mental pictures. For others, it can have drawbacks, as unwanted images may intrude with disturbing clarity, and distinguishing between remembered events and vividly imagined scenes can sometimes become challenging. Hyperphantasia appears to be associated with greater connectivity between visual cortex and other brain regions, allowing stronger voluntary activation of the perceptual machinery that normally responds to external stimuli. The spectrum from aphantasia to hyperphantasia illustrates the remarkable range of conscious experience, with individuals inhabiting very different phenomenal worlds despite sharing the same physical reality. The diversity of inner experience shows there is no single universal way to think. Taken together, the variations in inner speech, mental imagery, and other aspects of conscious experience reveal that there is no single universal way for a human mind to think. Some people think primarily in words, others in pictures, others in abstract patterns, or pure emotions without clear sensory form. Some have vivid access to their own inner states, while others experience their mental lives as comparatively muted or opaque. These differences are not disorders or deficiencies, but simply alternative ways that consciousness can be organized. For most of history, philosophers and psychologists assumed that their own inner experience was representative of how everyone thought, leading to theories that universalized one particular style of thinking at the expense of others. Modern research is revealing a much richer picture, in which the basic texture of conscious experience varies as much between individuals as do personalities or preferences. Understanding this diversity is not just academically interesting but practically important, as it suggests that educational and therapeutic approaches assuming a universal model of thinking may need to be adapted to accommodate the different minds they serve. Language may shape the structure of conscious thought. The words we have available to us may influence not just how we communicate, but how we think and perceive. This idea, sometimes called linguistic relativity, suggests that the categories a language provides shape the cognitive categories its speakers use to carve up reality. Languages differ dramatically in how they structure concepts, from the number of basic color terms they contain to how they express time, space, number, and causation. Some languages have no words for left and right, instead using absolute directions like north and south, even for describing the arrangement of objects on a table. Others have multiple words for concepts that English lumps together under a single term. Research has found subtle but detectable effects of these linguistic differences on perception, memory, and reasoning. The strong version of this hypothesis, that language determines thought absolutely, has been largely rejected, but the weaker claim that language influences and guides cognitive processes has substantial empirical support. The language you speak may not imprison your thinking, but it does provide the conceptual scaffolding that shapes how conscious experience is structured and understood. People who speak multiple languages may switch mental frameworks when switching languages. For the hundreds of millions of bilinguals and multilinguals in the world, the relationship between language and consciousness takes on an experiential dimension. Many report that they feel like slightly different people when speaking different languages, with different personalities, emotional tones, or ways of viewing the world emerging depending on which language is active. Research has found that moral judgments, risk assessment, and emotional responses can differ depending on whether a bilingual person is thinking in their first or second language. This may occur because each language was acquired in different contexts and carries different emotional associations, or because the cognitive demands of using a less fluent language engage more deliberative thinking. Some bilinguals report that they are more logical and less emotional when operating in their second language, as if the effort of translation creates distance from gut-level responses. The phenomenon suggests that language is not a neutral medium for expressing preformed thoughts, but actively shapes the cognitive and emotional texture of conscious experience. Bilingual brains may show delayed onset of dementia symptoms. Speaking multiple languages appears to confer lasting benefits for brain health. Numerous studies have found that bilingualism is associated with a delay in the onset of dementia symptoms, typically of 4 to 5 years, compared to monolingual speakers matched on other factors. This protective effect appears to result from the cognitive exercise of constantly managing two language systems, which strengthens executive function and builds cognitive reserve over a lifetime. Bilingual individuals show differences in brain structure and function even in young adulthood, with enhanced connectivity in regions involved in cognitive control. When dementia-related damage does begin to occur, the more robust cognitive reserve allows the brain to compensate for longer before symptoms become apparent. The bilingual advantage represents one of the most consistent and practically significant findings in cognitive neuroscience, suggesting that the mental gymnastics of switching between languages provides ongoing exercise for the brain that pays dividends in healthy aging. Learning and using additional languages may be one of the most effective ways to build lasting resilience in the organ that generates consciousness. Some languages use absolute directions which can enhance spatial awareness. In languages like Cook Thaayore, spoken by an Aboriginal community in Australia, there are no words for relative directions like left and right. Instead, speakers must use absolute cardinal directions, saying things like, "Pass me the cup to the north-northeast." To speak such a language, one must maintain constant awareness of one's orientation in space, a cognitive feat that would exhaust most English speakers after a few minutes. Remarkably, speakers of these languages show enhanced spatial orientation abilities compared to speakers of languages using relative directions. They know which way is north, even in unfamiliar environments, and can point accurately to distant locations. Children in these communities develop this spatial awareness early, as it is essential for communicating in their language. The phenomenon provides strong evidence that the requirements of language can shape cognitive abilities, training the conscious mind in skills that might otherwise remain undeveloped. The way a language forces its speakers to think leaves lasting traces on cognition that extend beyond the moments of actual language use. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that language influences perception and thought. The idea that language shapes thought has a long history in philosophy and linguistics, reaching its most influential formulation in the work of Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf in the early 20th century. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, as it came to be called, proposed that the structure of a language influences the worldview of its speakers, affecting how they perceive, categorize, and remember experience. In its strong form, the hypothesis suggested that language determines thought, making some concepts literally unthinkable for speakers of languages that lack words for them. This strong version has been largely rejected, as people can clearly think about things for which their language has no terms. However, the weaker version, that language influences and biases thinking without completely determining it, has received substantial empirical support. Studies have found that speakers of languages with different color vocabularies show subtle differences in color perception, that languages encoding time differently affect temporal reasoning, and that grammatical structures can influence attention and memory. Language may not create the walls of our cognitive prison, but it does help build the furniture we think with. The placebo effect shows that belief alone can reduce pain and improve symptoms. One of the most remarkable demonstrations of the mind's influence over the body is the placebo effect, in which inert treatments produce real physiological changes simply because patients believe they are receiving effective therapy. Sugar pills can relieve pain, saline injections can reduce inflammation, and sham surgeries can improve function, all through the power of expectation, rather than any direct physical intervention. The placebo effect is not imaginary, or the result of patients merely reporting improvement they do not feel. Brain imaging studies have shown that placebos can trigger the release of endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, and can modulate activity in regions involved in pain processing and emotional response. The effect is strongest when patients have greater confidence in the treatment, when the ritual of administration is more elaborate, and when the relationship with the healthcare provider is more supportive. Placebos cannot shrink tumors or cure infections, but for symptoms influenced by the brain's processing, including pain, fatigue, nausea, and mood, belief can be powerful medicine indeed. Brain scans reveal measurable changes when placebos are administered. The discovery that placebos produce measurable changes in brain activity helped transform them from curious anomalies into legitimate objects of neuroscientific study. When patients receive placebo pain relief, positron emission tomography and functional MRI scans reveal activation of endogenous opioid systems and modulation of activity in pain-processing regions like the anterior cingulate cortex and periaqueductal gray. These are not minor adjustments, but substantial changes that overlap significantly with the effects of actual analgesic drugs. Studies have found that blocking opioid receptors with the drug naloxone can reduce or eliminate placebo analgesia, proving that real neurochemical release is involved. Similarly, placebo treatments for Parkinson's disease have been shown to trigger dopamine release in the brain, producing measurable changes in motor function. These findings demonstrate that the mind-body distinction is far less sharp than commonly assumed, and that conscious expectations can cascade down through neural circuitry to produce tangible physiological effects. The placebo effect is not the absence of real change, but the presence of change triggered by belief rather than pharmacology. Biofeedback allows people to learn to control normally unconscious body functions. Through the technique of biofeedback, people can learn to consciously regulate physiological processes that normally operate entirely outside of awareness. By providing real-time information about heart rate, muscle tension, skin conductance, brain waves, or other bodily states, biofeedback allows individuals to observe the effects of their mental states on their bodies and gradually learn to control these processes deliberately. Patients have used biofeedback to reduce chronic pain, lower blood pressure, decrease muscle tension, and alter brainwave patterns associated with relaxation and focus. Some impressive applications have trained people with paralysis to control brain-computer interfaces, translating conscious intention into signals that can operate robotic limbs or computer cursors. The success of biofeedback demonstrates that the boundary between voluntary and involuntary physiology is not fixed, but can be shifted through learning. With sufficient practice and feedback, conscious awareness can extend its reach into territories of the body that seem entirely automatic, revealing that the scope of conscious control is greater than our everyday experience suggests. Expectations can change how the brain processes sensory information. What we expect to experience powerfully shapes what we actually experience. This is not merely a matter of interpretation or report, but represents genuine changes in how the brain processes sensory information. Studies have shown that telling someone a wine is expensive causes their brain's reward centers to respond more strongly than when the same wine is described as cheap. Expecting a touch to be painful causes the brain to process it as more painful than an identical touch not preceded by threatening cues. Expecting a food to taste delicious causes the flavor to actually taste better, with taste cortex activity reflecting the enhanced experience. These expectation effects occur because perception is not a passive reception of sensory data, but an active construction in which the brain combines incoming information with prior knowledge and predictions. When expectations and sensory input conflict, the brain often adjusts the sensory experience to match what was anticipated. This predictive nature of consciousness means that what we believe about what we will experience shapes the experience itself. The placebo effect can work even when patients know they are receiving a placebo. One of the most surprising recent discoveries about placebos is that they can produce benefits even when patients are explicitly told they are receiving inert treatments. In studies of what are called open-label or honest placebos, patients with conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic low back pain, and cancer-related fatigue were given placebos, along with explanations that the pills contained no active medication, but had been shown to produce improvements through mind-body mechanisms. Remarkably, many patients experience significant relief of symptoms, nearly as much as with deceptive placebos. This finding challenges simple explanations of placebo effects, based on deception and false belief, suggesting that the ritual of taking a medication and the engagement with a caring treatment process may be active ingredients, independent of specific expectations about the medicine itself. Open-label placebos also raise the intriguing possibility of harnessing placebo effects ethically in clinical practice without requiring deception, offering patients the benefits of the mind's healing power while respecting their autonomy and right to know what they are receiving. Many animals show signs of rich inner lives and emotional awareness. The question of whether animals experience conscious awareness has fascinated and troubled philosophers for centuries. Today, behavioral observations and neurological evidence increasingly support the view that many animals possess rich inner lives. Dogs display clear signs of emotional states like joy, fear, grief, and jealousy. Great apes demonstrate self-recognition in mirrors, understanding of others, mental states, and capacity for deception. Elephants mourn their dead, returning to bones of relatives and gently touching them with their trunks. Whales and dolphins show complex social relationships, distinctive cultural traditions, and what appears to be empathic behavior. In 2012, a prominent group of neuroscientists signed the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, formally affirming that many non-human animals possess the neurological substrates necessary for conscious experience. While we cannot know with certainty what it is like to be another species, the evidence suggests that the lights of awareness are on in many minds beyond our own, illuminating inner worlds we can only glimpse from outside. Octopuses have neurons distributed throughout their arms, allowing independent limb decision-making. The octopus presents one of the most alien forms of possible consciousness on Earth. Unlike vertebrates, whose neurons are concentrated in a central brain, octopuses have the majority of their neurons distributed throughout their 8 arms. Each arm contains about twice as many neurons as the central brain, and can operate with considerable independence, exploring, grasping and tasting objects, with minimal central oversight. If an arm is severed from the body, it can continue to respond to stimuli and perform coordinated movements for some time. This distributed nervous system raises fascinating questions about octopus consciousness. Does an octopus have a single unified experience, or something more like 8 semi-independent minds loosely coordinated through a central hub? Octopuses also display remarkable intelligence, solving complex puzzles, using tools, escaping from tanks, and showing individual personalities. Their evolutionary path diverged from ours over 500 million years ago, meaning that any consciousness they possess evolved independently from mammalian awareness, offering a glimpse at what intelligence and perhaps awareness can look like in a radically different biological architecture. Crows and ravens can solve complex problems and plan for the future. Among birds, the corvids, the family that includes crows, ravens, jays, and magpies, display cognitive abilities that rival those of great apes. New Caledonian crows craft and use tools in the wild, bending sticks into hooks to extract grubs from crevices, and modifying tools to improve their effectiveness. Ravens have solved multi-step puzzles, requiring planning and the manipulation of objects in a specific sequence, feats that suggest they can mentally model future states and work toward goals across delays. Studies have shown that corvids can remember the past actions of specific individuals and adjust their behavior accordingly, suggesting a form of episodic memory. They appear to understand what others can see and cannot, hiding food from potential thieves and employing counter-espionage tactics against rivals who might be watching. These abilities exist in a brain organized very differently from the mammalian brain, demonstrating that sophisticated cognition and possibly consciousness can emerge from diverse neural architectures through the force of convergent evolution. Bees may experience something like emotions based on their behavior and brain chemistry. Even in the tiny brain of a bee, there are hints of something that might qualify as emotional experience. When bees are shaken to simulate a predator attack, they subsequently show pessimistic cognitive biases, interpreting ambiguous stimuli more negatively than unstressed bees do. This pattern parallels findings in humans and other mammals, where anxiety produces similar negativity biases. Bees also show increased levels of dopamine and serotonin in response to reward, neurochemicals associated with positive emotional states in mammals. Their behavior suggests they can be in something like optimistic or pessimistic moods that influence their decisions and persist beyond immediate stimuli. Whether this constitutes genuine emotional experience or merely the functional analog of emotion, without any accompanying subjective feeling, remains uncertain. The investigation of possible insect emotions has expanded how we think about the distribution of consciousness in nature, raising the possibility that basic emotional awareness might extend far more widely than we previously assumed. Slime molds can solve mazes and make decisions without a brain. Perhaps the most surprising exhibit in the gallery of alternative cognition is the slime mold, a single-celled organism that can grow into a large network of interconnected tubes and make what appear to be intelligent decisions without possessing anything resembling a brain. Place a slime mold at the entrance of a maze with food at the exit, and it will extend its network to explore all paths before pruning back to leave only the shortest route to the goal. Slime molds placed on maps with food at the locations of major cities have independently recreated efficient transport networks that resemble actual human-designed rail systems. They can balance the trade-off between exploration and exploitation, remember which areas they have previously explored, and anticipate periodic events based on past patterns. No one suggests that slime molds are conscious in any meaningful sense, but their abilities challenge assumptions about the relationships between cognition, information processing, and neural complexity. Sophisticated information processing and adaptive decision-making can apparently emerge from very simple biological systems, blurring the boundaries between intelligence and mechanism. Brain size does not directly determine the richness of conscious experience. The assumption that larger brains necessarily produce richer consciousness has been challenged by discoveries across the animal kingdom. Crows and ravens show cognitive abilities comparable to chimpanzees, despite having brains a tiny fraction of the size. Elephants have brains 4 times larger than humans, yet do not demonstrate correspondingly greater cognitive powers in most domains. What seems to matter more than absolute brain size is the organization of neural circuitry, the density of neurons in key regions, and the patterns of connectivity that allow information to be integrated across the system. The neurons of birds are packed more densely than those of mammals, potentially compensating for smaller overall brain volume. Recent theories of consciousness focus less on the quantity of neural tissue and more on the quality and complexity of information integration within it. A conscious experience may depend not on how many neurons are present, but on how richly they communicate with each other, creating the intricate dance of electrical activity from which awareness somehow emerges. Computers can now simulate speech that sounds remarkably human. In recent years, artificial intelligence has achieved levels of language generation that would have seemed science fiction just a decade ago. Large language models can now produce text that is virtually indistinguishable from human writing, engaging in conversations, answering questions, composing poetry, and explaining complex topics with remarkable fluency. Speech synthesis has progressed to the point where artificially generated voices convey emotion, natural intonation, and the subtle rhythms of human speech with startling realism. These achievements raise profound questions about the relationship between language production and consciousness. When a computer generates a perfectly grammatical, contextually appropriate, and seemingly meaningful response, is there any experience accompanying this output? Most researchers believe not, viewing these systems as sophisticated pattern-matching machines without inner awareness. But the line between behavior that indicates consciousness and behavior that merely mimics it grows ever harder to draw, forcing us to confront fundamental questions about what consciousness is and how we would know if an artificial system possessed it. The Chinese room argument questions whether machines can ever truly understand. Philosopher John Searle proposed a famous thought experiment to challenge the idea that computers could ever truly understand or be conscious. Imagine a person who speaks no Chinese locked in a room with a complete set of rules for manipulating Chinese symbols. When Chinese speakers pass questions into the room, the person follows the rules to produce appropriate Chinese responses, which are passed back out. To those outside, it appears that whoever is in the room understands Chinese, yet the person inside is merely following rules without comprehending anything. Searle argued that this is exactly what computers do. manipulating symbols according to programs without any genuine understanding or meaning. The Chinese room argument remains controversial, with some philosophers accepting its conclusion that syntax is not sufficient for semantics, while others argue that understanding might emerge from the system as a whole, even if no individual component understands. The debate highlights the difficulty of distinguishing between genuine comprehension and its behavioral imitation, a challenge that becomes more pressing as artificial systems become more capable. Artificial intelligence can mimic conscious behavior without inner experience. Modern AI systems can pass increasingly sophisticated versions of the Turing test, engaging in extended conversations without revealing themselves to be machines. They can recognize and respond to emotions, adjust their language to different contexts, and even generate text in which they claim to have feelings and preferences. Yet despite these impressive performances, most experts believe that current AI systems lack any form of inner experience or consciousness. The systems are pattern-matching engines, predicting what text should come next, based on statistical regularities learned from vast training data. They have no goals, desires, or feelings unless programmed to simulate them. The gap between mimicking consciousness and actually possessing it may be unbridgeable for current computing architectures, or it may be that consciousness could emerge from sufficiently complex information processing regardless of the substrate. The uncertainty highlights how little we truly understand about why certain arrangements of matter give rise to subjective experience while others apparently do not. Digital devices already extend the boundaries of human memory. Long before the question of machine consciousness could be settled, technology began altering human consciousness in profound ways. Smartphones and digital devices now serve as external memory banks, storing information that our ancestors would have had to memorize. Phone numbers, addresses, appointments, and facts that once resided in biological memory are now offloaded to devices we carry everywhere. Research suggests that this extended mind changes how we use our biological memory, with studies finding that people are less likely to remember information when they know it is saved on a computer. Some researchers worry about cognitive atrophy, while others view this as a natural extension of a process that began with writing thousands of years ago. We have always used external tools to extend our mental capabilities, from paper and pen to libraries and now to the internet. The boundary between the mind and its tools grows ever more porous, raising questions about where consciousness ends and its technological extensions begin. Brain implants may one day restore lost memories or enhance cognition. The interface between biological brains and electronic devices is becoming increasingly sophisticated. Cochlear implants already provide a form of hearing to the deaf by converting sound into electrical signals delivered directly to the auditory nerve. Retinal implants offer limited vision to some blind patients. Deep brain stimulators treat Parkinson's disease and depression by modulating neural activity. Looking forward, researchers are working on brain-computer interfaces that might restore movement to paralyzed patients, allow communication for those who cannot speak, and potentially enhance memory and cognitive function in healthy individuals. Some experiments have successfully demonstrated that electrical stimulation can improve memory formation in humans, raising the possibility of future memory prosthetics. The prospect of directly augmenting human cognition with technology raises profound ethical and philosophical questions about identity, authenticity, and the nature of the self. If your memories are partly stored in a chip, if your mood is regulated by an implant, if your cognitive abilities are enhanced by a neural interface, are you still the same person you were before? The hard problem of consciousness asks why physical processes produce subjective experience. Neuroscience has made remarkable progress in explaining how the brain processes information, generates behavior, and represents the world. But one fundamental mystery remains stubbornly resistant to explanation. Why is there subjective experience at all? Philosopher David Chalmers dubbed this the hard problem of consciousness, to distinguish it from the easier problems of explaining cognitive functions. We can imagine, at least in principle, a world of philosophical zombies, who process information and behave exactly like us but have no inner experience, no light of awareness behind the eyes. So why do we have conscious experiences, rather than simply processing information in darkness? Why does seeing red feel like something rather than nothing? The hard problem highlights the explanatory gap between objective descriptions of brain processes and the subjective qualities of experience that those processes somehow generate. Some philosophers believe this gap will eventually be closed by advances in neuroscience, while others argue that consciousness may require fundamentally new forms of explanation that go beyond the physical sciences as currently understood. Panpsychism proposes that consciousness may be a fundamental feature of the universe. Faced with the difficulty of explaining how consciousness arises from unconscious matter, some philosophers have proposed a radical solution. Perhaps consciousness does not arise at all, but is instead a fundamental feature of reality present in some form everywhere. This view, called panpsychism, suggests that even elementary particles may possess some primitive form of experience, and that the complex consciousness we know emerges from the combination of these simpler experiences. While counterintuitive, panpsychism avoids the seemingly impossible task of explaining how purely physical processes could generate something as qualitatively different as subjective experience. If consciousness is built into the fabric of reality from the start, there is no mystery about its origin, only the question of how simple experiences combine into complex ones. Recent developments in physics and neuroscience have given some forms of panpsychism renewed respectability in academic philosophy, though it remains a minority view. The perspective highlights how fundamentally puzzling consciousness is, how we lack even a clear framework for explaining why anything should feel like anything at all. Some theories suggest consciousness arises from quantum processes in the brain. The strangeness of quantum mechanics has led some theorists to wonder if it might explain the strangeness of consciousness. Physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed that conscious awareness arises from quantum processes occurring in microtubules, tiny structures within neurons. According to their orchestrated objective reduction theory, these quantum effects collapse in ways that produce moments of conscious experience. If true, this would mean that consciousness is connected to the deepest level of physical reality, where the classical world we experience emerges from the quantum realm of superposition and entanglement. The theory remains controversial, with many neuroscientists arguing that the brain is too warm and noisy for quantum effects to persist long enough to matter. Others point out that even if quantum processes occur in neurons, it is not clear how they would explain the qualitative aspects of conscious experience any better than classical processes do. Nevertheless, the quantum consciousness hypothesis represents one of the more creative attempts to address the hard problem by looking beyond conventional neuroscience for explanatory resources. The sense of self may be an illusion constructed by the brain. When you introspect, you seem to find a unified self at the center of your experience, a continuing subject who perceives, thinks, decides, and acts. But many neuroscientists and philosophers argue that this sense of self is not a discovery, but a construction, a useful fiction generated by the brain, rather than a substantial entity actually present. The brain continuously generates the experience of being a self through the integration of memory, narrative, and present moment awareness, but when we look closely for the self itself, we find only the processes that construct its appearance. Buddhist philosophy reached similar conclusions thousands of years ago, describing the sense of permanent selfhood as an illusion that causes suffering. Modern meditation practices often aim to loosen identification with this constructed self, and experienced meditators report increases in states where the usual sense of being a separate observer witnessing experience fades away. If the self is indeed a construction rather than a thing, then what we think of as our deepest essence is more like a story the brain tells itself, continuously updated, but never capturing a fixed reality beneath the narrative. Consciousness research spans neuroscience, philosophy, physics, and artificial intelligence. The study of consciousness has become one of the most interdisciplinary fields in all of science and philosophy. Neuroscientists investigate the neural correlates of conscious experience, trying to identify which brain states are associated with awareness and which are not. Philosophers analyze the concepts involved, formulating the hard problem, exploring theories of what consciousness fundamentally is, and examining the relationship between mind and matter. Physicists interested in quantum mechanics and information theory contribute ideas about how consciousness might fit into fundamental physics. Computer scientists and AI researchers probe whether consciousness could be instantiated in machines and what tests might distinguish genuine awareness from sophisticated simulation. Psychologists study the contents and dynamics of conscious experience through behavioral experiments and introspective reports. Each discipline brings its own methods and perspectives, and progress seems to require integration across traditional boundaries. After decades of work, consciousness remains one of the most fascinating and difficult problems facing human inquiry, a mystery at the heart of what it means to be a knowing subject in a physical universe. No single theory yet fully explains how awareness emerges from the physical brain. Despite decades of intensive research across multiple disciplines, we still lack a comprehensive theory of how conscious awareness emerges from the physical activity of the brain. Several contending theories offer partial explanations. Global workspace theory suggests consciousness arises when information is broadcast widely across the brain. Integrated information theory proposes that consciousness corresponds to the degree of integrated information in a system. Higher-order theories argue that consciousness requires representation of mental states by higher cognitive processes. But none of these theories has achieved consensus, and each faces significant challenges and counterexamples. The gap between objective descriptions of neural processes and the subjective quality of experience remains as puzzling as ever. We can correlate brain states with conscious states. We can identify regions necessary for awareness. We can even predict someone's conscious experience from their brain activity with increasing accuracy. But we still cannot explain why these particular physical processes should give rise to subjective experience at all. This explanatory gap defines the current state of consciousness science, a field making steady progress on many fronts, while the deepest mystery remains fundamentally unsolved. Consciousness remains one of science's most profound unsolved mysteries. When we survey the great unsolved problems of science, from the nature of dark matter to the origin of life, consciousness stands out as uniquely strange. It is the one phenomenon that is both the most intimately familiar and the most difficult to bring within the framework of scientific explanation. We know consciousness exists more certainly than we know anything else, since all other knowledge comes to us through conscious experience. Yet we cannot explain how 3 pounds of electrically active tissue generates the felt quality of seeing blue, tasting coffee, or thinking about tomorrow. Consciousness has been called the last great mystery of science, the final frontier, whose conquest would complete our scientific understanding of the natural world. Others suspect it may remain permanently beyond the reach of the kind of explanation science provides, not because of any supernatural exemption, but because of the peculiar nature of the problem. Whatever the eventual resolution, the mystery of consciousness challenges us to think deeply about the nature of explanation, the scope of science, and what it means to understand ourselves. The brain studying itself is one of the most remarkable endeavors in human history. There is something almost paradoxical about the brain using itself to understand consciousness. The very organ we are trying to explain is the instrument we must use to do the explaining. The eye that sees cannot see itself without a mirror, and the brain that thinks cannot think about itself without some analogous reflection. Yet this is precisely what consciousness science attempts, a recursive investigation in which the knowing subject becomes the object known. This peculiarity gives consciousness research a philosophical depth that distinguishes it from other scientific fields. Every theory of consciousness is itself a product of consciousness. Every experiment designed and interpreted by conscious minds trying to understand their own nature. Some philosophers have argued that this circularity means we can never achieve an objective, external view of what consciousness really is. Others see the project as the most profound form of self-knowledge, the universe becoming aware not just of the stars but of the awareness that contemplates them. Either way, the brain studying itself represents one of the most remarkable and perhaps quixotic endeavors in the long history of human curiosity. Neuroplasticity means the brain can rewire itself in response to experience. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially fixed, its connections hardened and unchangeable after a critical period of development in childhood. We now know this is dramatically wrong. The brain possesses remarkable neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire its connections throughout life in response to experience, learning, and injury. London taxi drivers who memorize the complex streets of the city show enlarged hippocampi, compared to bus drivers who follow fixed routes. Musicians who practice intensively develop expanded representations of their fingers in sensory and motor cortex. Stroke patients can sometimes regain lost functions as surviving brain regions take over for damaged ones. This plasticity extends to consciousness itself, as the regular practice of meditation, the learning of new skills, and even changes in patterns of thought can physically reshape the brain regions involved. The implication is hopeful: we are not prisoners of our current neural wiring. The brain that generates your consciousness today is different from the one that generated it 10 years ago, sculpted by the experiences and choices that filled the intervening time. Every conscious moment is a unique pattern of activity that will never be repeated exactly. The state of your brain at this very moment, as you take in these words, and the subtle feelings that accompany them, is absolutely unique. Among the billions of humans who have ever lived, and the countless trillions of conscious moments they have experienced, no brain has ever been in precisely this configuration before, and none ever will be again. Like snowflakes or fingerprints, each moment of consciousness represents a one-time pattern of neural activity shaped by the entire history of a specific individual, encountering a specific set of circumstances in a specific instant of time. This extraordinary uniqueness is both reassuring and daunting. It means each conscious moment has a kind of irreplaceable value, a never-to-be-repeated experience that exists only once in the history of the universe. It also means that capturing the full richness of conscious experience, understanding exactly what it is like to be you right now, is in principle impossible to achieve through any general theory. The best we can hope for is to understand the principles that shape experience, while acknowledging that each instance is precious and fleeting. You are the universe become aware of itself through 86 billion neurons. In the grandest perspective, your conscious experience is the universe knowing itself from the inside. The atoms in your brain were forged in ancient stars, scattered through space by supernova explosions, gathered into the spinning disk that became our solar system, incorporated into the living systems of Earth, and eventually organized into the neural networks that generate your particular awareness. You are star stuff contemplating the stars, as Carl Sagan famously put it. Through your eyes, ears, and other senses, and through the remarkable information processing of your brain, the universe has developed the capacity to observe and wonder at itself. This is not mere poetry but literal fact. You are made of the universe, you are within the universe, and through you the universe experiences itself. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you carry this cosmic heritage within you. The same hydrogen atoms that powered the first stars now form part of the water molecules in your brain. The darkness that surrounds you as your eyes close is the same darkness that stretches between galaxies. And the consciousness that softly fades as sleep approaches is one of the universe's most remarkable and mysterious creations, a small warm light of awareness in the vastness of space and time. And now the quiet wonders of consciousness begin to gently fade into the stillness of the night. You have wandered through over 100 peaceful truths about the nature of awareness. From the gentle electricity that sparks within your brain, to the strange syndromes that reveal how fragile and extraordinary the self truly is. From the hidden depths of sleep to the puzzling boundaries where consciousness dissolves and reforms. You have explored how memories are woven and rewoven with each recall. How time stretches and shrinks according to emotion. How split brains can house two streams of awareness, and how some people see colors when they hear sounds. You have glimpsed the mystery of why anything feels like anything at all. You are part of this story. Every thought you have is a pattern of electrical signals forged by billions of years of evolution. The atoms in your brain were born in dying stars. The very awareness you feel right now, this sense of being here, is one of the deepest puzzles in all of existence. And yet it asks nothing of you tonight but to be gently experienced as it softens towards sleep. If your eyes feel heavy now, let them close. Let the rhythm of your breath become steady, like the slow waves of the sleeping brain. Like the patient pulse of neurons resting after a day of quiet work. Tonight, as you rest, consciousness continues its quiet miracle. Somewhere dreams are forming. Memories are consolidating. New connections are being woven in the darkness. The mystery of awareness drifts on through the night, carrying you gently along with it. You are a small, warm presence within this vast conscious world, peacefully resting among the wonders. Sleep well. Sweet dreams. And may you carry with you the quiet knowledge that you are one of the universe's ways of knowing itself, a pattern of stardust and electricity that learned to wonder, to feel, to dream, and will continue its gentle exploration long after the last thought of the day has dissolved into peaceful darkness. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the landscape of consciousness. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Drowsy Discovery for more soothing explorations of what it means to be aware. There are more wonders waiting. More secrets hidden in the folds of the mind. More gentle truths to drift through on quiet evenings. Rest well. And may the quiet mysteries of awareness keep you company through the night. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.